The Ministry of Magic stirred to life, as it did every weekday morning, with the thunderous roar of countless witches and wizards fluing into the vast atrium, their voices echoing off the polished dark wood floors and peacock blue ceiling. Kingsley Shacklebolt emerged from the emerald flames with practiced grace, his deep purple robes immaculate despite the journey, his gold hoop earring catching the light from the fountain that dominated the space. He paused, as he always did, to orient himself. Not because he needed to. Kingsley knew every inch of this building, every shortcut and forgotten corridor, but because pausing, observing, appearing thoughtful and unhurried was part of the mask he wore. The calm, dependable Auror. The man you could trust with your life, your secrets, your darkest fears, if only they knew. The golden fountain sparkled before him, its magical waterfalls catching the enchanted light. The statue depicted a noble wizard, beautiful witch, centaur, goblin, and house elf, all gazing adoringly at the wizard. Kingsley's jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. The imagery had always bothered him, but lately, with Fudge's desperate denial of Voldemort's return, with Umbridge's poisonous influence spreading through the Ministry like doxy venom, it felt obscene. The house elf especially, that expression of rapturous servitude frozen in gold. He dropped a sickle into the fountain for the St. Mungo's collection, as he did every morning, and moved toward the lifts. "Morning, Shacklebolt," Dirk Cresswell from the Goblin Liaison Office waved cheerfully, his round face beaming. Muggle-born, Kingsley noted automatically. The mental catalogue was becoming second nature now. Who was vulnerable? Who needed watching? Who might need help fleeing when the inevitable came? Because it was inevitable. Dumbledore knew it. The Order knew it. Voldemort was back, gathering power, and the Ministry's willful blindness only gave him more time to strengthen his position. "Cresswell," Kingsley returned the greeting with a warm smile, his deep voice carrying easily across the atrium. "Hope you're having a good morning." "Trying to. These goblins are being difficult about the new exchange rates, but what else is new?" Dirk laughed, heading toward a different lift. Kingsley watched him go, memorizing details. Dirk was senior enough to be noticed if he disappeared, which might buy him time. But he was also precisely the kind of Muggleborn who would be targeted early, successful, visible, integrated into Ministry operations. When the purges came, and Kingsley no longer allowed himself to think if Dirk Cresswell would be high on the list. The lift arrived with a clatter of golden grills. Kingsley stepped inside along with a gaggle of chattering witches from the Department of Magical Games and Sports, a tired-looking wizard clutching a steaming cup of something that smelled like burnt rubber, and a harried intern whose arms were stacked with precariously balanced files. "Level 2, called the cool female voice. "Department of Magical Law Enforcement, including the improper use of magic office, Auror headquarters, and Wizengamot Administration Services." Kingsley exited smoothly, nodding to the security wizard stationed near the lifts. Old Dawkins, who'd been there since before Kingsley had joined the Aurors. The corridor stretched before him, narrower than the atrium's grandeur, lined with doors bearing names in brass plaques. The scent of parchment and ink mixed with something more acrid, probably from the misuse of Muggle Artifacts Office down the hall. The Auror headquarters occupied a corner of Level 2, behind reinforced doors that required both wand identification and password. Kingsley placed his wand against the scanner, felt the tingle of recognition magic, and spoke clearly. "Constant vigilance." Mad-Eye Moody's favourite phrase. It had been the password for 3 weeks now. Kingsley wondered if Scrimgeour would ever change it, or if he kept it as some sort of tribute to Moody's paranoia. Paranoia that had, ironically, proven entirely justified. The doors swung open. Auror headquarters hummed with controlled energy. Desks were arranged in clusters, most already occupied despite the early hour. Maps covered one wall, charmed to show real-time incidents requiring Auror attention. A cluster of red dots over Nocturne Alley, as always. A yellow indicator near Hogsmeade that was probably a drunken wizard doing magic in front of muggles again. Scattered green dots marking routine patrols. Shacklebolt. Rufus Scrimgeour's gruff voice barked from his office doorway. The head of the Auror office looked more lion-like than ever, his tawny mane of hair slightly unkempt, his scarred hands planted on his hips. My office. 5 minutes. Yes, sir. Kingsley moved to his own desk, set down his dragonhide briefcase, and took a breath. This was where it got complicated. His desk was tidy. Kingsley made sure of that. Nothing to invite curiosity. Nothing to suggest anything other than a dedicated Auror doing his job. The assignments on top were legitimate. Surveillance reports on suspected Death Eater sympathizers. Follow-ups on dark artifact trafficking. A query from the Bulgarian ministry about curse-breaking cooperation. But beneath those, in a locked drawer with 3 separate protective enchantments, lay the real work. Lists, names, addresses, escape routes, safe houses. Everything he'd been compiling for months, ever since Dumbledore had quietly recruited him into the Reformed Order of the Phoenix. Kingsley didn't open that drawer. Not here. Not now. Instead, he pulled out a standard ministry memo pad and made notes for his meeting with Scrimgeour. His quill scratched softly against parchment, a sound so normal, so bureaucratic, that it was almost comforting. Almost. Kingsley, you're here early. Gawain Robards appeared at his elbow, holding 2 mugs of tea. The senior Auror smiled, offering one. Figured you could use this. Scrimgeour's been like a Hungarian horntail all week. Appreciated. Kingsley accepted the tea, noting the gesture. Robards was a good man, thorough and fair. Not order material, too much faith in ministry procedure, but decent. Any idea what this is about? The usual. Robards lowered his voice slightly, glancing around. More pressure from upstairs to stop investigating wild rumours about you-know-who. Fudge wants us focused on real threats, which apparently means Dumbledore these days. Kingsley's expression remained neutral, but his fingers tightened slightly around the mug's handle. Political pressure. Nothing new. No, but it's getting worse. Robards sighed, rubbing his face. Between you and me, I don't like where this is headed. We're Aurors. We're supposed to follow evidence, not orders from politicians covering their own. He caught himself, shook his head. Sorry. Long night? Understandable. Kingsley took a sip of tea. It was too hot, slightly bitter. Perfect. We do what we can within the system. That's what I keep telling myself. Robards clapped him on the shoulder and moved away. Within the system. The phrase tasted like ash in Kingsley's mouth. He'd believed in the system once, believed that Ministry of Magic, for all its flaws, ultimately served justice. That faith had been eroding for years, crumbling under the weight of corruption, prejudice, and willful ignorance. Now he operated outside the system, while appearing to be its perfect servant. The irony wasn't lost on him. Shacklebolt! Scrimgeour's bellow echoed across the office. Kingsley drained his tea, set the mug precisely in the centre of his desk, and walked calmly to Scrimgeour's office. The door was already open. Inside, the head Auror's domain was organised chaos. Stacks of reports, a sword mounted on the wall, a trophy from some long-ago raid, photographs of wanted criminals pinned to a corkboard. Close the door, sit. Kingsley obeyed, settling into the chair across from Scrimgeour's desk. He kept his posture relaxed, but attentive, his expression open. Every detail of body language mattered. Scrimgeour studied him for a long moment, those shrewd eyes searching for something. Finally, he spoke. "I'm assigning you to a new detail, protection duty." "Interesting. For whom, sir?" "The Muggle Prime Minister." Kingsley kept his surprise internal, allowing only a slight raising of his eyebrows. "The Muggle Prime Minister requires Auror protection." Fudge's orders, with all the tension. Lately, he wants someone reliable stationed in the Muggle government, someone who can monitor their activities, ensure no magical incidents, provide liaison if needed. Scrimgeour leaned back, his chair creaking. "You're the obvious choice. You understand Muggles better than most. Your father's work in Muggle relations saw to that. You're calm under pressure. You won't embarrass us." "I'm honoured by your confidence, sir." Kingsley paused, calculating. This was either the best possible assignment or the worst. Best, because it would give him freedom to operate, a legitimate reason to be away from the ministry for extended periods. Worst, because it might be a way to sideline him, remove him from the real action. When would this assignment begin? 2 weeks. I need you to finish your current caseload first. Scrimgeour pulled out a file, slid it across the desk. "Read this. Memorize the protocols. This is a sensitive assignment, Shacklebolt. The Muggle PM is being briefed about our world for the first time. Fudge wants someone who won't make this worse than it already is." Kingsley accepted the file, nodded. "I understand, sir. I'll treat this with appropriate gravity." "Good. That's all. Get back to work." Dismissed, Kingsley returned to his desk, mind racing. The Muggle Prime Minister assignment was unexpected, but he could work with it. More importantly, it meant he had 2 weeks to execute whatever operations were currently in motion. 2 weeks before his freedom to move within the ministry would be restricted. He needed to make them count. The morning passed in a blur of routine. Reports filed, memos answered, a brief consultation with Dawlish about a dark artifact smuggling ring operating out of Cardiff. Kingsley moved through it all with smooth efficiency, the perfect image of a dedicated Auror. But his mind was elsewhere. At 11:30, during a lull when most Aurors were grabbing early lunch, Kingsley retrieved a specific piece of parchment from his locked drawer. He developed a system. Coded lists that looked like innocent case notes, names disguised as locations, dates that meant something entirely different to anyone who knew the key. Today's list had one name highlighted in his mind: Eleanor Whitmore. He'd first noticed her 3 weeks ago, quite by accident. Kingsley made it his business to know everyone in the ministry who might be vulnerable. Every Muggle-born, every half-blood with questionable lineage, every blood traitor who'd drawn suspicion. Eleanor worked in the Department of Magical Accidents and Catastrophes, Level 3, Accidental Magic Reversal Squad. 24 years old, Muggle-born, parents lived in Sussex. Bright, dedicated, exactly the sort of witch who made the magical world better. Exactly the sort of witch who would be destroyed if Voldemort's followers took control. Yesterday, Kingsley had seen her name on a list he wasn't supposed to see. A list that had crossed Dawlish's desk. Dawlish, who was becoming increasingly vocal about the Muggleborn problem, who attended ministry parties where people whispered about blood purity after enough fire whiskey. Eleanor Whitmore was flagged for questioning by the newly formed Muggleborn Registration Commission, a committee that officially didn't exist yet, but which certain ministry officials were quietly preparing. Kingsley had less than 48 hours to get her out. He checked his pocket watch. 11:47. Eleanor would be at lunch now, probably in the ministry cafeteria with her colleagues. Too public. He needed a better opportunity. Rising from his desk, Kingsley stretched casually, as if stiff from sitting too long. He gathered a random file, one genuinely needing delivery to level 3, and headed for the lifts. The ministry cafeteria occupied a large space on level 1, always crowded, always noisy. The smell of shepherd's pie and pumpkin juice hung heavy in the air. Kingsley spotted Eleanor almost immediately. Brown hair pulled back in a practical bun, robes slightly ink-stained from her work, sitting with 2 other witches from her department. He didn't approach. Instead, he took a seat where he could observe, ordered a sandwich he didn't particularly want, and watched. Eleanor laughed at something her colleague said, but the laugh didn't quite reach her eyes. She was worried. Good. That meant she'd sensed the changing atmosphere, knew something was wrong even if she didn't know specifics. She'd be more receptive to warnings. Kingsley finished his sandwich methodically, wiped his hands on a napkin, and left. He had what he needed. Eleanor's routine, her demeanor, confirmation that she was still coming to work. Some targets went into hiding prematurely, spooked by rumors. That made extraction harder. You couldn't help people you couldn't find. But Eleanor was still here, still working, still hoping that everything would be fine. It wouldn't be. Back at his desk, Kingsley spent the afternoon on legitimate Auror work, letting hours pass, waiting for the right moment. Patience was crucial. Rushing led to mistakes, and mistakes in this game meant people died. At 4 o'clock, he finally made his move. Level 3's corridors were quieter than Level 2, painted in institutional grey-green that reminded Kingsley of hospital wings. The Department of Magical Accidents and Catastrophes operated behind a set of double doors, marked with official ministry seals. Kingsley entered with the confidence of someone who belonged everywhere, nodding to the receptionist, an elderly wizard named Perkins who'd worked there for 40 years. Afternoon, Perkins. Need to drop these files with Wilkins in reversal squad. Right through Auror Shacklebolt. You know the way. Indeed he did. The reversal squad occupied a cluster of offices toward the back, walls covered with charts showing Muggle memory modification statistics and accidental magic incident reports. Kingsley wound through desks until he found Arnold Wilkins, a portly wizard who looked perpetually overwhelmed. Shacklebolt, what brings an aura down to our chaos? Follow up on that incident in Clapham, the Muggle who saw a witch on a broomstick. Need your file for the prosecution. Kingsley kept his voice casual, professional. Is Eleanor Whitmore around? I think she handled the memory modification. Whitmore? Think she's in the back archives, pulling records for tomorrow's review. Wilkins gestured vaguely. Through that door, take a left. Appreciated. The back archives were dimly lit, rows of filing cabinets stretching into dusty shadows. Enchanted filing systems hummed softly, drawers occasionally opening and closing themselves as they organized contents. Perfect, private, secure. Eleanor stood before a cabinet, her wand lit, muttering to herself as she searched for files. She didn't hear Kingsley approach. He'd learned to move silently years ago, a skill that served him well. "Miss Whitmore." She spun, wand raised instinctively. Her eyes widened when she recognized him. "Auror Shacklebolt. Merlin, you startled me. Can I help you with something?" Kingsley glanced around, confirming they were alone. He stepped closer, lowering his voice to barely above a whisper. His next words would change everything. "Miss Whitmore, I need you to listen very carefully. Your life may depend on it." The colour drained from Eleanor's face. Her wand hand trembled slightly. "In approximately 36 hours, Kingsley continued, his deep voice steady, calming, "you will be called in for questioning regarding your heritage. This questioning will not be friendly. Do you understand what I'm telling you?" Eleanor's breath came shallow now. My heritage? But I haven't done anything wrong. I'm a registered witch. I've followed every. This isn't about what you've done. It's about who you are. Kingsley maintained eye contact, willing her to understand, to trust. There are people in this ministry who view your muggle-born status as inherently suspicious. That attitude is spreading, growing stronger. And you are on a list. "A list?" Her voice cracked. "What kind of list?" "The kind that doesn't end well." Kingsley reached into his robes, pulled out a small piece of parchment, already prepared, already charmed against detection. "Tomorrow at lunch you will go to the abandoned office on level 3, corridor E, third door on the left. Someone left files there that need reviewing. Do you understand?" Eleanor took the parchment with shaking hands. "I don't. Why are you helping me? How do I know this isn't some kind of test?" It was a fair question, a smart question. Kingsley respected her for asking it. "You don't know," he said simply. "You have to decide whether to trust me. But consider this. I'm a senior Auror. If I wanted to arrest you, to question you, to harm you in any official capacity, I could do so right now. I wouldn't need elaborate deceptions." He paused, letting that sink in. "Tomorrow, lunchtime, level 3. Bring nothing that would raise suspicion, but bring your wand. And then what? Then you'll be safe. I promise you that." Eleanor stared at him for a long moment, searching his face for deception, for ulterior motives. Kingsley let her look. He had nothing to hide, at least not from her. Finally, she nodded. "Level 3. Tomorrow. Lunch. Good. Act normally until then. Go about. Your routine. Raise no suspicions." Kingsley stepped back, his voice returning to normal volume. "And thank you for your help with those Clapham files. Much appreciated." He walked away, leaving Eleanor standing alone in the archives, clutching the parchment like a lifeline. As Kingsley rode the lift back to level 2, he allowed himself a moment of tension release, a slight loosening of his shoulders, a quiet exhale. The first step was complete. Eleanor knew she was in danger. She would come tomorrow, and tomorrow the real work would begin. The rest of the day passed uneventfully. Reports, meetings, the mundane machinery of ministry bureaucracy. Kingsley participated in all of it, his mask firmly in place, the calm and dependable aura everyone expected. By 6 o'clock, the office had largely emptied. Kingsley packed his briefcase, exchanged goodbyes with Robards and Proudfoot, and headed for the atrium. The fountain's golden figures gleamed in the evening light. Kingsley paused again, studying that house elf's adoring expression. Soon, he thought, soon that statue would be dust, and perhaps something better would take its place. Or perhaps just more dust. He stepped into a fireplace, threw down flue powder, and called out his address. The flames swallowed him, and for a brief moment Kingsley Shacklebolt allowed himself to stop pretending. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new risks. But tonight, Eleanor Whitmore would sleep as a free witch for one more night. He'd given her that much. It would have to be enough. The morning arrived cold and grey, typical November weather that seeped through the enchanted ceiling of the ministry atrium and made the golden fountain look almost tarnished. Kingsley Shacklebolt emerged from the flue network at precisely 8:15, early enough to appear dedicated, late enough not to draw attention for unusual punctuality. He'd barely slept. The night had been spent reviewing escape routes, backup plans, contingencies for contingencies. Every operation had variables, but this one felt particularly precarious. Eleanor Whitmore was an unknown quantity. Would she panic? Would she trust him? Would she mention their conversation to the wrong person? Too many questions, not enough answers. The atrium bustled with morning traffic, witches and wizards hurrying to their departments, some still clutching steaming mugs of tea, others buried in copies of the Daily Prophet. Kingsley caught a glimpse of the headline as someone walked past. Dumbledore's continued delusions. Minister assures public all is well. All is well. The phrase tasted bitter. Fudge's denial had moved beyond incompetence into active danger. Every day the minister spent pretending Voldemort hadn't returned was another day the Dark Lord spent gathering followers, consolidating power, preparing for the inevitable conflict. And people like Eleanor Whitmore would be the first casualties. Kingsley rode the lift to level 2, exchanging the usual morning pleasantries. Old Dawkins nodded from his security post. Gawain Robards waved from across the Auror office. Everything normal, everything routine, perfect. He spent the first 2 hours on legitimate work, genuinely legitimate, not just performance. A report on suspected Death Eater movements in Yorkshire needed completion. 3 witness statements about a dark artifact incident in Diagon Alley required review and filing. An interdepartmental memo about revised stunning spell regulations needed his signature. Kingsley worked methodically, his elegant handwriting flowing across parchment, his deep voice occasionally rumbling responses to colleagues' queries. The mask never slipped. At 10 o'clock, he requested access to the ministry's personnel registry, a routine request for an Auror conducting background checks on potential suspects. The clerk, a nervous young wizard named Pemberton, barely glanced at the authorization form before granting access. The registry occupied a secured room on level 2, walls lined with filing cabinets that contained every employee's records. Modern ministry efficiency meant most records were now stored on enchanted parchment that updated automatically, but the old physical files remained for historical purposes and backup redundancy. Kingsley found what he needed in 12 minutes. Eleanor Whitmore's complete personnel file. Address: Flat 4B, Thornbury Lane, Clapham, London. Emergency contact: Margaret Whitmore, mother, Sussex. Education: Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, 1987-1994, Ravenclaw House. OWLs 9, including Outstanding in Charms and Transfiguration. NEWTs 6, exceeds expectations or higher. Current position, Junior Obliviator, Accidental Magic Reversal Squad, hired 1994. Clean record. No disciplinary actions. Performance reviews consistently positive. A model employee who happened to have been born to non-magical parents. In a sane world, that wouldn't matter. Kingsley memorized the details. He never wrote anything down that could be traced, and returned the file. He thanked Pemberton absently, already planning his next move. Level 3. He needed to be there before Eleanor arrived, needed to ensure the abandoned office was truly secure, needed to set the stage for what came next. But first, he had to maintain appearances. Back at his desk, Kingsley found Rufus Scrimgeour waiting, arms crossed, expression thunderous. "Shacklebolt, my office, now." Several heads turned at Scrimgeour's tone. Kingsley remained calm, nodding acknowledgement, following the head Auror into his domain. The door shut with more force than necessary. "Sir?" Kingsley kept his voice neutral, curious, but not concerned. Scrimgeour paced behind his desk, his lion-like mane practically bristling. "I've just come from a meeting with Fudge and that bloody woman Umbridge. Do you know what they're proposing now?" "I'm afraid not, sir." "A Muggle-born Registration Commission." Official name. Official. Mandate. Official persecution dressed up as bureaucracy. Scrimgeour slammed his fist on the desk, making a stack of reports jump. "They want Aurors to enforce it. Want us to round up Muggle-borns for verification of magical heritage, as if being born to non-magical parents is somehow a crime." Kingsley's heart rate increased, but his expression remained carefully neutral, allowing only concern to show. "That seems extreme, sir." "Extreme? It's madness. It's the kind of thinking that led to Grindelwald's reign of terror." Scrimgeour dropped onto his chair, suddenly looking exhausted. "But Fudge is terrified. Terrified of Dumbledore, terrified of losing power, terrified of admitting he was wrong about you-know-who. So he's lashing out, finding scapegoats, letting people like Umbridge whisper poison in his ear." "What did you tell them, sir?" Scrimgeour looked up, his scarred face grim. "I told them the Auror office exists to uphold magical law, not to persecute citizens based on parentage. I told them that if they want to create some kind of blood purity enforcement division, they'd have to do it without my department." Relief flooded through Kingsley, though he kept it hidden. Scrimgeour was flawed, too trusting of ministry protocol, too willing to believe the system would correct itself. But he was fundamentally decent. How did they respond? Fudge blustered. Umbridge smiled that horrible smile of hers and said they'd find alternative resources. Scrimgeour rubbed his face. "I'm telling you this, Shacklebolt, because you need to understand what's coming. This ministry is rotting from the head down. We do what we can to hold the line, but there are battles we might not be able to win." "I understand, sir." "Do you?" Scrimgeour's shrewd eyes studied him. "You're one of the best Aurors I have. Steady, reliable, incorruptible. But times are changing, and not for the better. You may face choices soon, choices between following orders and following your conscience." Kingsley met his gaze steadily. "If that time comes, sir, I hope I'll have the courage to make the right choice." Something flickered in Scrimgeour's expression. Respect, perhaps, or recognition. "So do I, Shacklebolt, so do I. Now get back to work, and keep your ears open. If you hear anything about this registration commission actually being implemented, I want to know immediately." "Of course, sir." Dismissed, Kingsley returned to his desk, mind racing. So it was official now. Not just whispers and rumours, but actual policy proposals. The timeline was accelerating. He'd been right to act when he did. Eleanor Whitmore's name had been on that list for a reason. At 11:30, Kingsley rose from his desk, stretched casually, and announced to no one in particular, heading to Level 7. Need to consult with the Department of Magical Games and Sports about that Cardiff smuggling case. Apparently, some of the artifacts were enchanted Quidditch equipment. Gawain Robards grunted acknowledgement without looking up from his paperwork. Perfect. Kingsley took the lift down, but didn't exit at Level 7. Instead, he rode it to Level 3, stepping out into the quieter corridors of the Department of Magical Accidents and Catastrophes. The abandoned office was exactly where he told Eleanor it would be. Corridor E, third door on the left. It had belonged to a long-retired department head, and bureaucratic inertia meant it had never been reassigned. The door's brass plaque was tarnished, the name barely legible. Cornelius Fairchild, Senior Obliviator, 1967-1989. Kingsley checked the corridor, empty, and slipped inside. The office was a time capsule. Dust covered every surface. An ancient desk sat against one wall, its drawers hanging open and empty. Filing cabinets lined another wall, their contents long since archived elsewhere. A single window looked out onto the atrium's enchanted sky, currently displaying grey November clouds. But the room's real value lay in what most people wouldn't notice: the portrait. It hung on the wall opposite the window, half hidden behind a broken coat rack. The frame was ornate but dusty, the canvas depicting an elderly wizard with impressive mutton chop whiskers dozing in a leather chair. The nameplate read, Cornelius Fairchild, 1901-1989. Portraits were the Ministry's greatest security weakness and the Resistance's greatest asset. The subjects could travel between frames, carry messages, observe without being observed. Most Ministry officials had forgotten how extensive the portrait network truly was. Kingsley had not forgotten. He approached the portrait, keeping his voice low. Master Fairchild. The painted wizard's eyes opened, alert, despite the appearance of sleep. Auror Shacklebolt, I've been expecting you. Is everything prepared? The route is clear. Phineas has confirmed the flu connection in the old archives is still active, though barely. Your window is approximately 15 minutes during the lunch rush. After that, security sweeps increase. Fairchild's painted eyes were sharp. The girl knows to come here? She knows. And you trust her not to panic? Kingsley considered the question. I trust her to want to survive. That will have to be enough. Fairchild nodded slowly. Dumbledore chose well when he brought you into the Order. You have the temperament for this work, the necessary coldness wrapped in apparent warmth. Is that a compliment? It's an observation. The portrait smiled slightly. Be careful, Auror. The Ministry has eyes everywhere, and not all of them sleep as convincingly as I do. Noted. I'll return with Eleanor shortly after noon. Kingsley slipped back into the corridor, closing the door silently behind him. He checked his pocket watch. 11:47. Eleanor would be finishing her morning work, preparing for lunch. Most of the department would clear out between noon and 1 o'clock, heading to the cafeteria or fluing home for quick meals. That was when he'd move. The cafeteria on Level 1 was already filling when Kingsley arrived at 11:55. He ordered shepherd's pie he didn't want, found a seat with a clear view of the entrance, and waited. Eleanor arrived at 12:03, looking pale and drawn. She'd barely slept either, Kingsley guessed. She collected a sandwich and pumpkin juice, then sat alone at a small table near the back, deliberately isolated from her usual colleagues. Smart. She was learning to be invisible. Kingsley ate slowly, methodically, playing the role of an Auror taking a routine lunch break. Around him, ministry workers gossiped about department politics, Quidditch matches, weekend plans. Normal life continuing as if the world wasn't teetering on the edge of darkness. At 12:15, Eleanor stood, discarded her half-eaten sandwich, and left the cafeteria. Kingsley waited 3 minutes, long enough to avoid obvious connection, then followed. Level 3's corridors were nearly empty, most personnel at lunch. Kingsley moved with purpose, but not haste. Another ministry employee on another routine errand. He turned into Corridor E, approached the third door on the left, and knocked softly. The door opened immediately. Eleanor stood inside, her face pale, wand gripped tightly in her hand. "You came," she whispered. "Did you doubt I would?" Kingsley entered, closed the door, cast a quick muffliato charm to prevent eavesdropping. "How are you holding up?" "I barely slept. I kept thinking this was a trap, or a test, or that I'd wake up and it would all be some paranoid nightmare." Eleanor's voice shook slightly. "But then, this morning, my supervisor pulled me aside, asked me about my parents, about whether I'd maintained contact with the Muggle world, about whether I considered myself truly integrated into magical society." Kingsley's jaw tightened. "They're accelerating the process, moving faster than I anticipated. What do they want with me? I haven't done anything wrong. You were born to Muggle parents. In the eyes of certain ministry factions, that's crime enough." Kingsley kept his voice steady, calming. "But you're not going to let them harm you. We're getting you out." "Out? Out where? This is my life. My job, my flat, my friends. Your life means nothing if you're dead or imprisoned." The words were harsh, but necessary. Eleanor needed to understand the stakes. "Listen to me carefully. There are safe houses, places protected by ancient magic, hidden from ministry detection. The Order of the Phoenix maintains them for situations exactly like this." "The Order of the Phoenix? But that's just rumors, stories from the First War." "It's real. I'm a member. And right now, membership means the difference between freedom and captivity." Kingsley glanced at the portrait, received a subtle nod from Fairchild. "We have approximately 10 minutes before security sweeps increase. I need you to trust me, Eleanor. Can you do that?" Eleanor stared at him, tears, threatening, at the corners of her eyes. Then, slowly, she nodded. "What do I need to do?" "First, your wand. Have you cast any unusual spells today? Anything that might be traced?" "No, just standard office charms. Locking spells, filing organization, the usual." "Good. From this moment forward, you cast nothing unless I tell you to. Wand traces are how they track people." Kingsley moved to the portrait, addressed Fairchild directly. "We're ready." The painted wizard stood, stretching as if waking from a long nap. "The route is clear, but hurry. Dawkins is finishing his rounds on level 2 and will head down shortly." "Where are we going?" Eleanor asked, confusion mixing with fear. "Through there." Kingsley pointed at the portrait. "Portrait passages connect throughout the ministry. Most people have forgotten they exist, which makes them perfect for our purposes." Eleanor's eyes widened. "We're going inside a painting." "Unless you'd prefer to walk through the front door and explain to security why you're fleeing." Kingsley's tone was gentle, despite the words. "Trust me, Eleanor. "I've done this before." That was a lie. This was his first actual extraction. But Eleanor didn't need to know that. Fairchild's portrait had already swung open like a door, revealing darkness beyond. Kingsley withdrew his wand, whispered Lumos, and watched warm light bloom at the tip. "I'll go first. Follow immediately behind me. Keep your left hand on my shoulder so we don't get separated. The passage will be narrow and disorienting. Don't panic, just keep moving." He paused. "Ready?" Eleanor took a shaky breath, then nodded. Kingsley stepped into the portrait frame. The transition was always disturbing. Reality seemed to thin and compress, colours bleeding into painted approximations of themselves. The passage beyond was indeed narrow, barely wide enough for single file, painted stone walls pressing close on either side. Kingsley's wandlight cast dancing shadows that looked almost alive. He felt Eleanor's hand grip his shoulder, heard her sharp intake of breath as she entered the portrait world. "Stay close," he murmured, moving forward. The portrait passage wound through layers of reality most wizards never glimpsed. They passed other frames, a landscape painting showing rolling hills, a still life of fruit that looked oddly menacing in the wandlight, a portrait of 3 stern-looking witches who watched them pass with suspicious eyes. "Who are they?" Eleanor whispered. "Former headmistresses of Hogwarts," Kingsley replied. "They're connected to the Ministry Portrait Network. Don't worry, they're on our side." The passage descended, then turned sharply left. Kingsley counted paces automatically, mapping their route. 83 steps from Fairchild's frame, then a right turn. 42 more steps, then light ahead. Another portrait frame, this one showing a library scene. Kingsley stopped, making Eleanor pause as well. He whispered to the portrait's occupant, an elderly wizard reading a book. "Is the archives clear?" The painted wizard barely glanced up. "2 researchers. Northeast corner. Your exit is southwest. Be quick and quiet." "Understood." Kingsley turned to Eleanor. "When we exit, we'll be in the old Ministry archives on level 3. Stay low, stay quiet. Follow my lead exactly. Understood?" Eleanor nodded, her face pale but determined. Kingsley stepped through the portrait frame. The transition back to reality was jarring, colours suddenly vivid, sounds sharp after the muffled quality of the portrait world. They emerged behind a towering bookshelf in the archives, dust motes dancing in shafts of light from high windows. Kingsley immediately went still, listening. Voices from the northeast corner, 2 witches discussing a historical document, their conversation academic and unhurried. Perfect. They were absorbed in research, wouldn't notice anything else. He gestured to Eleanor. "Follow, stay low, move quickly." They crept along the southwest wall, using bookshelves as cover. The archives stretched vast and shadowy, centuries of ministry records creating a maze of information. Kingsley knew exactly where he was going. He'd scouted this route 3 times over the past week. At the far southwest corner, behind a shelf labelled Department of Mysteries Records, 1772-1801, sat a fireplace. It was small, clearly intended for heating rather than transportation, and looked like it hadn't been used in decades. Soot and cobwebs filled the opening. But appearances were deceiving. Kingsley had tested it 2 days ago, confirmed the flu connection was still active. He knelt before the fireplace, withdrew a small pouch of flu powder from his robes. Eleanor watched with wide eyes. "This connects to a safe house outside London," Kingsley whispered. "When you arrive, Wait for the people there to identify themselves. They'll say, Dumbledore sends his regards. Don't trust anyone who doesn't use that exact phrase. Understood. But what about you? I'm returning to my office as if nothing happened. Your absence won't be noticed until this afternoon, and by then you'll be secure. He pressed the flu powder pouch into her hands. Eleanor, listen carefully. Once you step through, you can't come back. Your old life is over. I'm sorry, but that's the reality. Tears spilled down Eleanor's cheeks now. My parents. The Order will contact them. Explain you're safe, but had to leave. We'll arrange for letters, for eventually maybe even a visit. But not yet. Not while it's dangerous. Kingsley's deep voice was gentle but firm. You have about 30 seconds to decide. Stay here and face the registration commission, or step through that fire and live. Eleanor looked at the fireplace, then at Kingsley, then back at the fire. Her hands trembled as she opened the flu powder pouch. Thank you, she whispered. I don't know why you're doing this, but thank you. Because it's right. Because no one should be persecuted for who their parents are. Because... Kingsley stopped, shook his head. Go, before someone comes. Eleanor threw the powder into the fireplace. Green flames roared to life, casting eerie light across the archives. She stepped forward, spoke clearly. 14 Blackwood Lane. The flames swallowed her, and then she was gone. Kingsley stood alone in the archives, listening to the crackling flames die down, leaving only cold ashes. From the northeast corner, the two researchers continued their discussion, completely oblivious. He allowed himself 3 seconds of relief. 3 seconds to feel the weight of success, of one life saved, of one small victory against approaching darkness. Then he straightened, brushed dust from his robes, and walked calmly toward the archive's exit. By 12:47, Auror Kingsley Shacklebolt was back at his desk on level 2, reviewing paperwork, his expression calm and focused. When Gawain Robards asked if he'd found what he needed at magical games and sports, Kingsley nodded easily. Everything's sorted. Just a misunderstanding about jurisdiction. Excellent. Oh, and Dawlish wants your input on that Cardiff case when you have a moment. I'll catch him before end of day. Normal conversation. Normal work. Normal life. The afternoon passed in routine bureaucracy. At 3:30, word spread through level 3 that Eleanor Whitmore hadn't returned from lunch. Her supervisor was annoyed, but not yet worried. People occasionally took long lunches, especially when feeling under the weather. By 4 concern was growing. By 5 her flat had been checked. Empty. No signs of struggle. By 5:30, the Auror office received an official request to investigate a possible missing person. Rufus Scrimger assigned it to Dawlish, who spent an hour asking questions, checking flu records, finding absolutely nothing. Kingsley offered to help, was thanked, but told they had sufficient personnel on it. At 6:15, he packed his briefcase, bid his colleagues good evening, and flew home. Only when he reached his own flat, wards secure around him, did Kingsley finally allow the mask to drop. He poured himself a measure of fire whiskey, stood at his window looking out over Muggle London, and let himself feel the full weight of what he'd done. 1 life saved. How many more would need saving before this was over? The fire whiskey burned going down, warming him from the inside. Kingsley raised his glass in a silent toast. To Eleanor Whitmore, to freedom, to small victories in long wars. Tomorrow, he'd wear the mask again. Tonight, he'd allow himself to be human. it would have to be enough. The morning after Eleanor Whitmore's disappearance arrived with unexpected snow, fat flakes drifting past the ministry's enchanted windows, settling on the golden fountain in the atrium like a benediction. Kingsley watched the snow accumulate as he rode the lift to level 2, noting how it softened the harsh edges of the ministry's architecture, made everything look almost peaceful, deceptive, that peace, like everything else in this building lately. The Auror office hummed with tension when Kingsley arrived at 8 o'clock. Dawlish stood near the incident map, gesturing emphatically while speaking to Proudfoot and Savage. Scrimgeour's office door was closed, never a good sign. Other Aurors worked at their desks with unusual intensity, the kind of focus that meant something significant had happened. Kingsley set down his briefcase, removed his cloak, and approached Gawain Robards. "What's the situation?" Robards looked up, his weathered face grim. The Whitmore case just got complicated. Someone broke into her flat last night. Kingsley's expression remained perfectly neutral, but his mind raced. Broke in? Was anything taken? That's the strange part. Nothing obvious. But her wardrobe was searched, desk drawers rifled through, letters scattered. Whoever did it was looking for something specific. Robards lowered his voice. And they weren't ministry. The Magical Law Enforcement Patrol found evidence of unauthorized apparition and unlocking charms that aren't standard Auror technique. Death Eaters. That's what Scrimgeour thinks, though officially we're not supposed to use that term anymore. Robards' tone dripped sarcasm. Fudge prefers unidentified criminal elements. But yes, the spell signatures match known Death Eater methodology from the First War. Kingsley processed this information, recalibrating his understanding of the situation. He'd anticipated ministry interest in Eleanor's disappearance, routine investigation, questions, eventually a cold case. But Death Eater involvement meant something more sinister. They were hunting her specifically, which meant the Registration Commission wasn't just bureaucratic persecution, it was targeted elimination. "What's our assignment?" Kingsley asked, keeping his voice level, professional. Dawlish's lead on this one, but Scrimgeour wants all senior Aurors briefed. Meeting in 15 minutes. Robards glanced towards Scrimgeour's office. "Between you and me, the head is livid. A ministry employee, vanishing under mysterious circumstances, her flat ransacked by possible Death Eaters. This is exactly the kind of thing that makes Fudge's everything is fine narrative look ridiculous. Do we have any leads on Eleanor's whereabouts?" "Nothing. She left work for lunch yesterday, never returned. Flu records show no travel to her registered address. No one's seen her. No family contacts, no magical signature traces. She's just gone." Robards shook his head. "Poor girl. Probably terrified, in hiding somewhere. Or safe in an Order safe house, being briefed on her new identity, preparing to leave Britain entirely." But Kingsley couldn't say that. "I'll review the case files," he said instead. "Maybe fresh eyes will catch something." "Good luck. Dawlish has been over them 6 times already." Kingsley returned to his desk, opened his briefcase, and withdrew a stack of parchment, his own case notes, carefully constructed to appear thorough, while revealing nothing useful. He'd learned long ago that the best way to deflect suspicion was to appear helpful, to generate paperwork, to be seen working diligently on the problem. The morning briefing confirmed what Robards had already told him. with added details that made Kingsley's stomach tighten. The break-in at Eleanor's flat had been methodical, professional. The intruders had used detection spells to search for hidden compartments, tracking charms to identify frequently touched objects, even dark magic to extract memories from the flat's ambient magical signature. They were thorough. They were dangerous. And they'd found nothing because Eleanor had owned nothing incriminating, just the ordinary possessions of a young witch building a life. "Shacklebolt," Scrimgeour called as the briefing ended. "A word." Kingsley followed the head Auror into his office, closing the door behind him. Scrimgeour stood at his window, looking out at the snow-covered atrium below. "You know what this means," Scrimgeour said without preamble. "Sir? Death Eaters operating openly in London, targeting Ministry employees, breaking into homes." Scrimgeour turned, his scarred face set in hard lines. "All the things Fudge swears aren't happening. All the threats he claims are imaginary." "The evidence does suggest organized dark wizard activity," Kingsley agreed carefully. "It suggests war, Shacklebolt. War that's already started, whether Fudge acknowledges it or not." Scrimgeour moved to his desk, pulled out a file, slid it across. "I'm assigning you to a special investigation. Quiet, off the books. I want you to track Death Eater movements in London, document everything, build a case so strong that even Fudge can't ignore it." Kingsley picked up the file, scanning the contents. Lists of suspected Death Eater sympathizers, incident reports of dark magic, witness statements about mysterious figures in masks. Good intelligence, thorough research, dangerous work. Also perfect cover for order operations. "This will require significant autonomy," Kingsley observed. "Freedom to follow leads without standard oversight." "You'll have it. Report directly to me, no one else. Use whatever resources you need." Scrimgeour's eyes were hard. "I know what's coming, Shacklebolt. I can feel it in my bones. The Ministry is rotting from within, and Fudge is too blind or too cowardly to stop it. So we do what we can, where we can, for as long as we can." "I understand, sir. I won't let you down." "I know you won't. That's why I chose you." Scrimgeour paused. "One more thing. The Muggle Prime Minister assignment. It's been accelerated. Fudge wants you in position by next week." "Next week? But you said—" "I know what I said. Plans change. Fudge is paranoid about Muggle relations now, worried about what stories might spread if this Death Eater activity spills over. He wants our best man protecting the Muggle government." Scrimgeour smiled grimly. "Lucky you." Kingsley absorbed this news, already calculating implications. 1 week to finalize whatever order operations were in progress. 1 week before his movements would be restricted, his time accounted for, his freedom to operate severely limited. 1 week to save as many lives as possible. "I'll be ready, sir." "Good. Now get to work. And Shacklebolt? Be careful. If Death Eaters are bold enough to break into a Ministry employee's home, they won't hesitate to target Aurors they consider obstacles." "I'll watch my back, sir." Dismissed, Kingsley returned to his desk, mind already racing through revised timelines, accelerated plans, contingencies that now needed immediate implementation. Eleanor had been the first extraction, the test case. But his coded lists contained 37 more names. Muggleborns, half-bloods, blood traitors, all vulnerable, all potential targets. 37 lives. 1 week. Impossible. But he'd do what he could. At noon, Kingsley skipped lunch in the cafeteria, instead taking the lift to level 1. He needed to contact the Order, needed to brief them on the accelerated timeline, needed coordination that couldn't happen through normal channels. The Ministry's public flue network occupied a bank of fireplaces near the atrium, always busy with witches and wizards travelling to appointments, meetings, other Ministry departments. Kingsley joined the queue, waited his turn with apparent patience. When he reached a fireplace, he threw flue powder, spoke clearly. Grimald Place. The flames roared green, but instead of stepping through, Kingsley simply held his head in the fire, a technique that allowed communication without actual travel, leaving no trace in flue records beyond the initial powder use. The spinning, disorienting sensation lasted only seconds. Then Kingsley found himself staring into a dimly lit kitchen, his head floating in the fireplace like some grotesque decoration. Sirius Black jumped, nearly dropping his mug of tea. "Merlin's beard, Kingsley! Warner man!" "Sorry, is Dumbledore available?" "He's at Hogwarts. Won't be back until tonight. What's wrong?" Sirius set down his tea, moving closer to the fireplace. His face looked gaunt in the flickering light, the toll of months in hiding evident in every line. Timelines accelerated, ministries moving faster than anticipated on Muggle-born persecution. I need to increase extraction operations, but I'm being reassigned next week. Less freedom to operate. Sirius's expression darkened. How many people are we talking about? 37 on my priority list. Realistically, I might manage 10 more before the window closes. 10 out of 37. Sirius's voice was bitter. The rest just have to hope they survive long enough for the Ministry to wake up. Or for the Order to expand operations. But right now, I'm one person with limited resources and shrinking time. Kingsley glanced over his shoulder. The flue queue was growing, people getting impatient. I need safe house availability increased. Multiple locations, rapid rotation. Can that be arranged? I'll talk to Dumbledore the moment he returns. We'll make it work somehow. Sirius paused. How's Eleanor? Safe. Arrived last night at Blackwood Lane, being briefed today. Scheduled for relocation to Ireland by week's end. One life saved. Sirius smiled grimly. It's something. It has to be. Kingsley heard someone cough pointedly behind him in the queue. I need to go. I'll send updates through the usual channels. Be careful, Kingsley. They're getting bolder. I know. You too. Grimald Place isn't as secure as you think. Kingsley pulled his head from the flames, stumbling slightly as reality reasserted itself. He nodded apologetically to the irritated witch waiting behind him, stepped aside, and returned to level 2. The afternoon passed in careful choreography. Kingsley worked on his official assignment, documenting Death Eater activity, while simultaneously using the research as cover to identify extraction targets. Every name he investigated, every file he pulled, every witness he interviewed served dual purposes. Arnold Wilkins from the Goblin Liaison Office needed warning. His flat was in Southwark, his parents living in Brighton, both easy to track, both vulnerable. Susanna Hayes, a Muggle-born witch in the Department of Magical Transportation, had already received anonymous threats. Her file showed she'd reported them to her supervisor, who dismissed them as pranks. Thomas Pemberton, the nervous young clerk from Personnel Registry, lived alone, had no family, would be an easy target for anyone wanting to make an example. 37 names, 37 lives. Each one a person with hopes, fears, families, futures, each one running out of time. At 4 o'clock, Kingsley received an unexpected visitor. Nymphadora Tonks knocked on his desk partition, her hair currently a somber brown that suggested she was trying to blend in. "Watcher, Kingsley. Got a minute?" "Of course." Kingsley gestured to an empty chair. Tonks was new to the Aurors, enthusiastic, talented, occasionally clumsy, and secretly an Order member. Dumbledore had recruited her shortly after her graduation from the training program. Tonks sat, glancing around to ensure no one was listening. "Heard about the Whitmore case, the break-in. News travels fast. I was on patrol in Clapham last night, about 3 blocks from her flat." Tonks's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Saw 3 figures in masks apparating away around midnight. Didn't get a clear look, but the magical signatures felt wrong. Dark." Kingsley's attention sharpened. "Did you file a report?" "Tried to. Dawlish told me I was seeing things, that fatigue causes paranoia, that I should focus on real threats instead of jumping at shadows." Tonks's jaw tightened. Real threats, as if Death Eaters aren't real. Dawlish's. Following ministry line, Fudge's denial filters down through every department. Kingsley paused, choosing words carefully. "Did you recognize any of the figures?" "One moved like Dolohov, same distinctive gait, but I can't prove it." Tonks met his eyes. "Kingsley, what's really going on? Eleanor Whitmore vanishes, Death Eaters ransack her flat, and the ministry pretends it's just a missing person case. What's going on is that some people in power refuse to see what's in front of them, and innocent people suffer for that blindness." Kingsley's voice remained low, controlled. "You're a good Auror, Tonks. Trust your instincts. Document everything you see, even if reports get dismissed. Build your own case files. When the truth finally comes out, we'll need people who kept accurate records." Tonks nodded slowly. "And if the truth never comes out, if Fudge keeps his head in the sand until it's too late, then we do what we can with what we have. We save who we can save. We fight when we can fight. And we never stop trying to be better than the darkness around us." Kingsley allowed himself a slight smile. "Your mother would be proud of you, by the way. Andromeda raised a daughter with a strong moral compass. Mum doesn't know half of what I see in this job. I keep the worst from her. She worries enough already." Tonks stood, her hair shifting to a defiant purple. "Thanks, Kingsley, for being straight with me. Thank you for trusting your eyes last night. That kind of vigilance saves lives." After Tonks left, Kingsley sat for a long moment, staring at his case files. The younger generation was watching, learning, preparing for the conflict they all knew was coming. That was something. Not enough, but something. At 6 o'clock, most of the Auror office had cleared out. Kingsley remained at his desk, ostensibly finishing paperwork, actually planning his next moves. 3 extractions were possible this week, maybe 4 if he pushed. Wilkins, Hayes, and Pemberton were priorities. The 4th could be. "Still here, Shacklebolt?" Dawlish appeared at his desk, looking tired and frustrated. "Thought you'd have gone home by now." Wanted to finish reviewing the Whitmore evidence. Fresh perspective, as Robards suggested. Kingsley gestured to the scattered parchments on his desk. "Finding anything useful?" "Nothing. It's like she vanished into thin air." Dawlish dropped into the chair Tonks had vacated. "Between you and me, I think she ran. Got spooked about something, decided to disappear." "Spooked about what?" "Who knows? These Muggleborns are paranoid lately, seeing threats everywhere. Maybe she heard rumours about the Registration Commission, panicked, fled before anyone could explain it was just administrative oversight." Dawlish shrugged. probably hiding with Muggle relatives, thinking she's escaping persecution when really she's just running from paperwork. Kingsley kept his expression neutral, but internally he filed away Dawlish's words. The man genuinely believed Muggle-borns were overreacting, that the Registration Commission was harmless bureaucracy, which made him either dangerously naive or willfully complicit. Administrative oversight, Kingsley repeated. That's one interpretation. It's the logical interpretation. Fudge isn't some blood supremacist monster. He's just trying to maintain order during uncertain times. Dawlish stood, stretching. Anyway, I'm heading out. Don't stay too late. The case will still be here tomorrow. Sound advice. After Dawlish left, Kingsley remained at his desk for another hour, making notes, refining plans, preparing for the week ahead. The snow had stopped falling outside, leaving the atrium blanketed in white. Beautiful and cold, like so much about the Ministry these days. At 7:30, Kingsley finally packed his briefcase. But instead of heading to the atrium fireplaces, he took the lift to level 3. The corridor outside Eleanor's old office was dark, lit only by flickering wall sconces that created dancing shadows. Kingsley moved quietly, checking for security patrols, finding none. The office was still sealed with Ministry tape from the investigation, but that wouldn't stop him. He needed to check the portrait passage, ensure it remained secure, verify that no one had discovered the route Eleanor had used to escape. The office door opened with a whispered "Alohomora." Inside, dust motes drifted in the dim light from the corridor. Kingsley closed the door, lit his wand, and approached the portrait of Cornelius Fairchild. The painted wizard was awake, watching him approach. Auror Shacklebolt, I heard about the flat. Death Eaters. They're hunting her specifically. But they won't find her. The Order's protections are thorough. Fairchild's painted eyes were somber. How many more, do you think? How many more will need this route? As many as I can manage in the next week. After that, my assignment changes. I'll have less freedom. Then we make this week count. Fairchild gestured to the darkness beyond his frame. The passage remains secure. I've been monitoring the portrait network. No unusual activity, no signs of discovery. When you're ready to move the next person, we'll be prepared. Thank you, Cornelius. Your service matters more than you know. We all serve in our own ways, Auror. Some fight with wands, some with words, some with painted eyes that see what others miss. Fairchild smiled slightly. My service is small, but I give it gladly. Kingsley nodded, feeling the weight of those words. Everyone in the Order carried their piece of the burden, did their part in the larger struggle. Portraits and Aurors, house elves and Order members, all working toward the same goal. Survival, resistance, hope. He left the office, resealed the door, and took the lift to the atrium. The golden fountain gleamed in the evening light, that obscene statue still depicting servitude as joy. Soon, Kingsley thought. Soon that would change. But first, 37 names. 1 week. He stepped to a fireplace, threw flue powder, and called out his address. The flames swallowed him, carrying him home to his flat, where he could drop the mask and be himself for a few precious hours. Tomorrow, he'd save another life. Tonight, he'd plan how to save them all. It would have to be enough. Wednesday morning arrived with bitter cold and a ministry buzzing with fresh rumours. Kingsley heard them as he moved through the atrium. Whispered conversations about another Muggle-born who'd quit unexpectedly, about increased security measures being discussed in closed-door meetings, about Dolores Umbridge being seen more frequently on level 2, her pink cardigans and simpering smile appearing where they had no business being. The noose was tightening. Kingsley rode the lift to level 2, exchanging pleasantries with a witch from magical maintenance who complained about the heating charms failing on level 9. He sympathized appropriately, suggested she file a maintenance request, all while his mind catalogued the day's carefully choreographed activities. Arnold Wilkins. Today's target was Arnold Wilkins. The Goblin Liaison Office Clerk was precisely the kind of vulnerable Muggleborn the Registration Commission would target. Visible, successful, integrated into Ministry operations. Kingsley had verified his home address, confirmed his routine, identified the optimal extraction window. Everything was prepared. But first, he had to perform. The Auror office was already chaotic when Kingsley arrived. Proudfoot stood near the incident map, pointing at new red markers that had appeared overnight. Savage was shouting into the Flu network about something involving unauthorized apparition near Diagon Alley. Dawlish hunched over his desk, looking like he hadn't slept. "Shacklebolt!" Scrimgeour's voice cut through the noise. "Conference room, now. Senior staff meeting." Kingsley set down his briefcase and followed Scrimgeour into the glass-walled conference room. Robards and Proudfoot filed in behind him, along with 3 other senior Aurors. Through the glass, Kingsley could see the rest of the office continuing their work, oblivious to whatever was about to be discussed. Scrimgeour closed the door, cast a privacy charm that made the glass fog opaque. "Gentlemen, we have a problem." He spread a stack of parchments across the conference table. Incident reports, witness statements, intelligence summaries. Kingsley scanned them quickly, his practiced eye picking out key details. 7 Muggleborn witches and wizards had quit ministry positions in the past 10 days. 4 more had filed transfers to foreign ministry branches. 2 had simply stopped coming to work without explanation. 13 people, all Muggle-born, all vanishing from ministry employment within a fortnight. "This isn't coincidence," Scrimgeour said flatly. "This is a pattern. Someone is either forcing these people out, or they're fleeing because they know something we don't. Or they're being recruited by someone," Dawlish interjected. "Dumbledore, maybe, building his own private force while undermining ministry authority." Kingsley kept his expression thoughtful, concerned, appropriately troubled. Internally, he noted that only one of those 13 names had been on his extraction list, Eleanor Whitmore. The other 12 had fled on their own initiative, sensing danger, choosing survival over careers. Smart, but also terrifying. If a dozen people had independently decided the ministry was too dangerous, how many more were considering the same? "Dawlish raises a valid concern," Proudfoot said. "Dumbledore has been recruiting. The old Order of the Phoenix is reforming. We have confirmation from multiple sources." "The Order of the Phoenix isn't the threat here," Kingsley said calmly. Everyone turned to look at him. Think about it logically. If Dumbledore were recruiting ministry employees, he'd want them to stay in place, feed him intelligence, act as informants. Mass resignations serve no strategic purpose. "Then what's your theory?" Scrimgeour asked. "Fear. These people are afraid. Whether that fear is justified or paranoid is irrelevant. They believe they're in danger, so they're running." Kingsley gestured to the reports. "Look at the timeline. It accelerates after Eleanor Whitmore's disappearance and the break-in at her flat. Word spreads in the Muggleborn community. They see one of their own vanish, see Death Eaters, unidentified criminal elements, ransacking her home, and they panic. So what do you suggest? Robards leaned forward. We can't protect people who won't tell us they're in danger. We could start by acknowledging the danger exists. The words came out sharper than Kingsley intended. He softened his tone. Sorry. Long night. But the point stands. If Fudge keeps denying you-know-who's return, keeps pretending the Death Eaters aren't operating openly, we can't effectively counter the threat. Scrimgeour's expression suggested he agreed, but couldn't say so officially. Our job isn't to make policy, Shacklebolt. It's to enforce the law and protect citizens within the constraints we're given. Even when those constraints cripple our effectiveness. Especially then, because the alternative is chaos. Scrimgeour gathered the reports back into a stack. Here's what we're going to do. Robards, I want you coordinating with department heads across the ministry. Any Muggle-born employee who seems nervous, distracted, or mentions leaving, I want to know immediately. Proudfoot, increase patrols in areas where Muggle-borns live. Visible presence, community reassurance. And me, sir? Kingsley asked. You continue your special investigation, but add this to your brief. I want to know if there's an organized element to these departures. Are they coordinating? Is someone helping them flee? If so, who? Scrimgeour met Kingsley's eyes. And if you find evidence of a network assisting these people, I want to know before you take any action. Understood? Perfectly, sir. The meeting concluded. Kingsley returned to his desk, mind already adjusting plans. Scrimgeour was getting too close to the truth, asking exactly the right questions, which meant Kingsley needed to be even more careful, even more invisible in his operations. At 10 o'clock, he made his first visible move. Robards, I'm heading to Goblin Liaison. Want to interview some of the staff who knew Eleanor Whitmore, see if she mentioned anything unusual before her disappearance. Good thinking. Let me know what you find. Kingsley took the lift to level 5, where the Goblin Liaison office occupied a suite of rooms decorated with uncomfortable-looking furniture and austere art, apparently designed to make visiting goblins feel at home, though Kingsley suspected it just made everyone miserable. Arnold Wilkins sat at his desk near the back, surrounded by stacks of parchment detailing exchange rates, treaty negotiations, and vault security protocols. He looked up when Kingsley approached, his round face showing surprise and immediate nervousness. Auror Shacklebolt, how can I help you? Just following up on the Eleanor Whitmore case. Understanding she worked on the same floor, thought someone here might have noticed if she seemed troubled before her disappearance. Kingsley kept his voice casual, friendly. Mind if I ask you a few questions? Of course not, though I didn't really know Eleanor well. Different departments, you understand. Wilkins fidgeted with his quill. Is there any news about what happened to her? Still investigating. These things take time. Kingsley glanced around, noting who was in earshot. Too many people. Actually, this might be easier in a more private setting. Is there a conference room available? Conference room C should be empty. Just down the hall, second door on the right. Perfect. Would you mind joining me there? Won't take more than a few minutes. Wilkins's nervousness increased, but he nodded, gathering his robes and following Kingsley down the corridor. The conference room was small, windowless, furnished with a single table and 6 chairs. Kingsley gestured for Wilkins to sit, then closed the door and cast the same privacy charm Scrimgeour had used earlier. Wilkins's eyes widened. Auror? What's this about? Your safety. Kingsley sat across from him, keeping his posture open, non-threatening. Arnold. May I call you Arnold? I need you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you. I don't understand. Your name is on a list, the same kind of list Eleanor Whitmore's name was on. Kingsley watched comprehension and fear dawn in Wilkins's eyes. The Muggle-born Registration Commission is moving faster than anyone anticipated. Within the next 72 hours, you'll be called in for verification of magical heritage. That questioning won't be gentle, and the consequences won't be administrative. Wilkins's face went pale. But I haven't done anything wrong. My record is spotless. I've been with the ministry for 8 years. This isn't about what you've done. It's about who your parents are. Kingsley's voice remained steady, calm. I'm offering you a choice, Arnold. You can wait for that summons, hope the system protects you, trust that justice will prevail. Or you can let me help you disappear before they come calling. Disappear? You mean leave? Leave my job, my life, everything? Wilkins's voice cracked. Run like a criminal when I've committed no crime? Yes, because the alternative is worse. How do I know this isn't a trap, some kind of loyalty test? How do I know you're not working for whoever's compiling these lists? The questions came fast, desperate. You're an Auror. Your job is to enforce ministry law. Why would you help me break it? Because some laws are unjust. Because I took an oath to protect people, not persecute them. Because... Kingsley stopped, chose his next words carefully. My father worked in Muggle relations for 30 years. He believed magical and non-magical people could coexist, that the source of someone's magic mattered less than how they chose to use it. He taught me that justice and law aren't always the same thing. Wilkins stared at him, tears threatening at the corners of his eyes. If I run, they'll know I'm guilty of something. They'll say I fled because I had something to hide. They'll say that regardless, but you'll be alive to hear them say it. Kingsley leaned forward slightly. I helped Eleanor Whitmore. She's safe now, protected, starting a new life somewhere the Registration Commission can't reach her. I can do the same for you. But you have to decide now, today. Once the summons comes, it will be too late. My parents will be contacted, arrangements made. The people I work with have experience protecting families, moving them to safety when necessary. The people you work with. Wilkins's voice sharpened despite his fear. Who are they? Dumbledore's lot? The order everyone whispers about? Kingsley didn't answer directly. Does it matter? Would you rather trust the ministry that's compiling lists of Muggle-borns or the people trying to save them? Silence stretched between them. Through the door, muffled sounds of the Goblin Liaison Office continued. Normal work, ordinary bureaucracy, the machinery of ministry life grinding forward as it always had. Finally, Wilkins spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. What do I need to do? Relief flooded through Kingsley, though he kept it hidden. Tonight, you'll go home as normal. Pack a small bag, essentials only, nothing that suggests you're fleeing. Tomorrow morning, instead of coming to work, you'll go to the Leaky Cauldron. Order breakfast. Sit at the table nearest the back staircase. At precisely 9 o'clock, someone will approach you and say, Dumbledore sends his regards. Go with them. Trust them. They'll take you to safety. Tomorrow morning. Wilkins looked panicked. That's so soon. I need time to think, to prepare. You don't have time. The summons could come today, tomorrow, any moment. Kingsley's tone remained gentle, but firm. "I know this is terrifying. I know you're being asked to give up everything you've built. But your life is worth more than your desk, your flat, your routine." Wilkins nodded slowly, shakily. "The leaky cauldron. 9 o'clock. Dumbledore sends his regards." "Exactly. And Arnold. Act completely normal for the rest of today. Finish your work, chat with colleagues, show no sign that anything is wrong. Can you do that?" I think so. Yes, I can do that." "Good man." Kingsley stood, removed the privacy charm. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Wilkins. If you remember anything else about Eleanor Whitmore, please let me know." "Of course, Auror Shacklebolt. Happy to help." The words came out mechanical, rehearsed, but adequate. They returned to the main office. Kingsley made a show of thanking Wilkins again, exchanging pleasantries with other Goblin liaison staff, asking a few perfunctory questions about Eleanor that yielded nothing useful. The perfect image of an Auror conducting a routine investigation. Back on level 2, Kingsley documented his morning activities in careful detail. Interview conducted, witness statements recorded, no significant leads identified. Everything official, everything traceable, everything providing perfect alibis. At noon, he skipped lunch again, instead taking the lift to level 1. He needed to contact the Order, coordinate Arnold Wilkins's extraction, ensure safe house availability for tomorrow morning. The flu queue was shorter today. Kingsley threw powder, spoke clearly. Grimmauld Place. This time, Remus Lupin answered, his scarred face appearing in the flames as Kingsley held his head through. "Kingsley, I was hoping you'd contact us today. Wilkins is ready for extraction. Tomorrow, 9 o'clock, Leaky Cauldron. Can we manage that?" "Already arranged. Hestia Jones will make the pickup. She'll have him in a safe house by noon." Remus paused. "Dumbledore wants to know if you can accelerate the timeline. Move more people faster." "I'm already pushing the limits of what's possible without drawing suspicion. 3 more this week, maybe 4. That's the best I can do. 3 or 4 more lives saved is nothing to dismiss." Remus's voice was gentle. "We know the burden you're carrying, Kingsley. We know the risks you're taking. The risks are necessary. The burden is—" Kingsley stopped, hearing someone cough behind him in the queue. "I have to go. Tomorrow, 9 o'clock. We'll be ready. Be safe." Kingsley pulled his head from the flames, nodded apologetically to the wizard waiting behind him, and returned to level 2. The afternoon stretched ahead, full of carefully orchestrated normality. He attended a briefing about dark artifact trafficking, reviewed case files on suspected Death Eater sympathizers, consulted with Proudfoot about patrol routes, wrote 3 reports, filed 6 memos, responded to 4 interdepartmental queries, every action documented, every movement accounted for, every minute providing alibi. At 3 o'clock, Dolores Umbridge appeared in the Auror office. She stood near the entrance, her pink cardigan somehow more offensive than usual, her toad-like face set in a simpering smile. Several Aurors glanced up, then quickly returned to their work. No one wanted Umbridge's attention. "Auror Shacklebolt," she called sweetly. "Might I borrow you for a moment?" Every instinct screamed danger, but Kingsley rose smoothly, his expression politely curious. "Of course, Madam Undersecretary. How can I assist you?" "Perhaps we could speak in private." Umbridge gestured toward an empty conference room. Kingsley followed, noting that Scrimgeour had emerged from his office, watching the interaction with narrowed eyes. Good. Witnesses. Whatever Umbridge wanted, it would be observed. The conference room door closed. Umbridge settled into a chair, folding her hands primly on the table. I understand you're investigating the recent departures of certain ministry employees. I'm assisting with the Eleanor Whitmore case, yes, as well as documenting concerning patterns in employee resignations. Concerning patterns, yes, quite. Umbridge's smile never wavered. The minister is troubled by these departures. So many Muggle-born employees choosing to leave at once. It creates a rather unfortunate impression, doesn't it? What impression would that be, ma'am? That they don't feel safe here. That they believe the ministry harbours prejudice against their kind. The way she said their kind made Kingsley's skin crawl. Of course, nothing could be further from the truth. The ministry values all its employees equally. I'm certain that's the official position. The official position and the actual position, Auror Shacklebolt. Umbridge's smile tightened slightly. Which is why the minister has asked me to coordinate a special committee, purely administrative, you understand, to ensure our Muggle-born employees feel supported and valued. The Muggle-born Registration Commission. Oh my, that's such a harsh name. We prefer Magical Heritage Verification Committee. Umbridge giggled, a sound like nails on parchment. Much more welcoming, don't you think? Much more, Kingsley agreed blandly. I'm glad you understand. Now, as you investigate these troubling departures, I'd appreciate regular updates. Anyone you interview, any leads you develop, I want to be informed immediately. Umbridge's eyes, magnified behind her glasses, studied him carefully. After all, we're all working towards the same goal, aren't we? Keeping our ministry employees safe and secure? Of course, Madam Undersecretary, I'll ensure you receive copies of all relevant reports. Wonderful. I knew you'd be cooperative. Umbridge stood, smoothing her cardigan. One more thing, Auror. Have you noticed any unusual behaviour among your colleagues? Anyone expressing sympathy for Dumbledore's delusions? Anyone who might be, shall we say, overly concerned about these Muggle-born departures? The question was a trap. Kingsley recognised it immediately. Umbridge was hunting for Order sympathisers within the Ministry, looking for people whose loyalty might waver. My colleagues are professional Aurors focused on their duties, ma'am. If I observe anything concerning, I'll report it through proper channels. Of course you will. You're very reliable, aren't you, Auror Shacklebolt? Very trustworthy. Umbridge's smile was almost predatory now. The minister speaks highly of you, says you're exactly the kind of Auror the ministry needs, steady, loyal, unswayed by radical elements. I serve the ministry to the best of my abilities. Yes, I'm sure you do. Umbridge moved toward the door, then paused. Oh, one last thing. Arnold Wilkins from Goblin Liaison. I understand you interviewed him today. Kingsley's heart rate spiked, but his expression remained neutral. Routine questioning about Eleanor Whitmore. He didn't provide any useful information. Well, Mr. Wilkins is scheduled for heritage verification next week. Just administrative, of course. Nothing to worry about. Umbridge's smile turned saccharine. I'm sure he has nothing to hide. She left, her footsteps clicking down the corridor. Kingsley remained in the conference room for 30 seconds, forcing his breathing to steady, his hands to stop trembling with barely contained rage. Umbridge knew. Maybe not specifically about the extractions, but she suspected. She was watching, testing, waiting for him to make a mistake. He couldn't afford mistakes. Returning to his desk, Kingsley found Scrimger waiting. The head Auror gestured toward his office. Once inside, door closed, Scrimger spoke bluntly. What did that toad want? To remind me that Big Sister is watching, to test my loyalty, to see if I'd give her ammunition against Dumbledore or the Order. Kingsley met Scrimger's eyes. She's building a network of informants, sir, trying to identify anyone who might oppose the Registration Commission. I know. Fudge has given her carte blanche to ensure Ministry security. Scrimger's voice dripped disgust. Be careful, Shacklebolt. Umbridge is dangerous precisely because she hides her malice behind administrative procedure. She'll destroy careers, ruin lives, and do it all with proper paperwork and that bloody smile. I understand, sir. Do you? Because if she suspects you're helping people flee, suspects you're working with Dumbledore, she'll come after you. And I won't be able to protect you. I'm not asking for protection, sir. I'm asking to do my job, which is protecting people, regardless of their blood status. Scrimger studied him for a long moment. You're a good man, Kingsley. Better than this ministry deserves. Just be careful. The righteous don't always survive wars. No, sir, but they sleep better at night. The rest of the afternoon passed without incident. Kingsley worked steadily until 6 o'clock, then packed his briefcase and headed home. Tomorrow, Arnold Wilkins would disappear. Another life saved, another small victory. But Umbridge was watching now, and the careful dance was getting harder to maintain. Thursday morning broke grey and threatening, clouds hanging low over London like a curse waiting to fall. Kingsley stood at his flat's window, watching muggles hurry through the streets below, umbrellas already deployed against the promise of rain. They moved through their lives blissfully unaware of the magical world existing alongside them, ignorant of the war brewing in the shadows. Sometimes he envied them that ignorance. He checked his pocket watch. 7:15. Arnold Wilkins would be waking now in his Southwark flat, probably terrified, possibly reconsidering his decision. The extraction was scheduled for 9 o'clock at the Leaky Cauldron. Hestia Jones would make contact, speak the code phrase, guide Wilkins through the portrait passage to a safe house in Cornwall. Simple, clean, low risk. Except nothing was simple anymore. Not with Umbridge circling like a vulture, not with the timeline accelerating, not with every extraction increasing the chances of discovery. Kingsley dressed with deliberate care, deep purple robes, gold earring, dragonhide boots, polished to a mirror shine. Every detail of his appearance reinforced the image. Successful Auror, ministry loyalist, exactly what everyone expected to see. The mask fit so well these days, he sometimes forgot he was wearing it. He flew to the ministry at 7:45, earlier than usual, but not suspiciously so. The atrium was already bustling. Ministry workers arriving for early meetings, interdepartmental memos zooming overhead like demented paper airplanes, the golden fountain's water sparkling in the enchanted morning light. That statue still made his stomach turn. The house elf's expression of rapturous servitude, frozen in gold, seemed more obscene with each passing day. "Early start, Shacklebolt," old Dawkins called from his security post near the lifts. Case reports won't write themselves, unfortunately. Kingsley smiled, his deep voice carrying easily across the atrium. "How's your grandson doing? Started at Hogwarts this year, didn't he?" "Sorted into Hufflepuff the lad was. Wrote us last week. Loves it there, says the house elves in the kitchens make the best treacle tart he's ever tasted. Dawkins beamed with grandfatherly pride. Give him my congratulations. Hufflepuff produces excellent Aurors. Loyalty and hard work beat raw talent every time. The exchange was brief, friendly, perfectly normal. But Kingsley noted the detail. Dawkins's grandson at Hogwarts meant the old security guard had family invested in the magical world's future, made him someone who might resist if darkness truly took hold, or might not. Loyalty was complicated, and fear made people do terrible things. The Auror office was nearly empty when Kingsley arrived. Just Proudfoot at his desk, looking exhausted, and a junior Auror named Savage filing reports near the back. Perfect. Fewer witnesses, less scrutiny. Kingsley settled at his desk, withdrew yesterday's case files, and began the careful choreography of appearing busy. He reviewed witness statements from the Cardiff smuggling case, genuinely reviewed them, making actual notes, because half-hearted deception was easily spotted. He drafted a memo to the Department of Magical Transportation about suspicious flu activity, real work that happened to provide perfect cover. At 8:30, Gawain Robards arrived, looking grim. Morning, Kingsley. Heard you had a chat with Umbridge yesterday. News travels fast. In this building? Always. Robards dropped his voice. What did she want? To remind me I'm being watched, to test my loyalty, to see if I'd hand her ammunition against Dumbledore. Kingsley kept his tone neutral, professional. Standard intimidation tactics dressed up as friendly conversation. She's poison, that woman. Pure poison. Robards glanced around, ensuring no one was listening. Scrimgeour's getting pressure from Fudge to cooperate with her special committee. The Muggle-born registration thing. Head's resisting, but I don't know how long he can hold out. As long as he has to. Scrimgeour's more stubborn than he looks. Stubborn gets you sidelined in this ministry. Or worse. Robards shook his head. Anyway, what's your plan today? Following up on those Death Eater movement reports. Thought I'd check with contacts in Diagon Alley, see if anyone's noticed unusual activity. The lie came easily, smoothly. Might be gone most of the day. Sounds good. Keep your head down and your wand ready. Always do. At 8:45, Kingsley gathered his dragonhide briefcase, nodded to Proudfoot and Savage, and took the lift to level 1. The Flu Network fireplaces were already busy with morning traffic. Witches and wizards travelling to appointments, meetings, errands throughout magical London. Kingsley joined the queue for the public flu access, waiting patiently while a flustered witch argued with the attendant about flu powder charges. When his turn came, he threw powder into the flames, spoke clearly. Diagon Alley. The spinning, disorienting sensation of flu travel lasted mere seconds. Then Kingsley stumbled out into the crowded fireplace of the Leaky Cauldron, brushing soot from his robes. The pub was moderately busy, witches and wizards grabbing breakfast before shopping. A few suspicious-looking individuals hunched over fire whiskey, despite the early hour. Tom the barkeeper polishing glasses behind the bar with a rag that looked older than Kingsley. And there, at a table near the back staircase, sat Arnold Wilkins. He looked terrible, dark, circles under his eyes, hands trembling slightly as he pushed eggs around his plate without eating, his round face pale and drawn. He'd followed instructions, came alone, ordered breakfast, sat at the designated table, but his terror was almost palpable, too obvious. Anyone watching would notice something was wrong. Kingsley didn't approach directly. Instead, he moved to the bar, ordered tea from Tom, engaged in brief small talk about Quidditch scores and the weather. Playing the role, Auror on assignment, taking a brief break before conducting interviews in Diagon Alley. At precisely 8:58, a witch entered the leaky cauldron. Hestia Jones was unremarkable by design. Medium height, brown hair, robes that were quality, but not memorable. The kind of person you'd pass on the street without noticing. Perfect for this work. She ordered coffee, collected it, and moved toward the back of the pub. Kingsley watched from the corner of his eye, sipping his tea, appearing completely absorbed in the Daily Prophet someone had left on the bar. The headlines screamed about Dumbledore's continued undermining of ministry authority. Fudge's propaganda machine working overtime. Hestia approached Wilkins's table. She spoke softly, but Kingsley's trained hearing caught the words. Dumbledore sends his regards. Wilkins looked up, relief and fear warring on his face. He nodded, stood shakily, left coins on the table for his untouched breakfast. Hestia gestured toward the stairs, leading up to the Leaky Cauldron's guest rooms. They moved together, two strangers sharing a staircase. Nothing suspicious to casual observers. But Kingsley noticed the man in the corner. Dark robes, hood pulled forward, nursing a fire whiskey and pretending not to watch. His posture was too alert, his apparent disinterest too studied. Watcher. Possibly ministry surveillance, possibly Death Eater, definitely dangerous. Kingsley's mind raced. Hestia would take Wilkins through a guest room, pre-arranged, unoccupied, to a portrait passage that connected to the safe house network. The route was secure, tested, but if the Watcher followed, if he reported back, if he identified Hestia, decision point. Let it play out or intervene. Kingsley made his choice. He stood, stretched casually, and moved toward the staircase. Not hurrying, not appearing concerned, just an aura heading upstairs for perfectly legitimate reasons. The hooded Watcher tensed, seemed to consider following, then settled back. Kingsley's presence complicated things. An aura's testimony about suspicious behavior would be hard to explain away. Good. Let him worry. Kingsley climbed the stairs slowly, giving Hestia and Wilkins time. The Leaky Cauldron's upper floor was a maze of narrow corridors and creaking floorboards. He heard a door close ahead. Room 7, the prearranged location. He waited in the corridor, appearing to examine a particularly ugly painting of a bowl of fruit, actually listening for any sounds of pursuit. Footsteps on the stairs, the hooded Watcher following after all. Silence. Just the Leaky Cauldron's normal sounds. Muffled conversation from below. Someone moving around in room 3. Rain beginning to patter against windows. After 5 minutes, the door to room 7 opened. Hestia emerged alone, looking calm and composed. She nodded slightly to Kingsley. An acknowledgement, not recognition, and descended the stairs. Arnold Wilkins was gone. Through the portrait, into the network, on his way to Cornwall and safety. 2 extractions complete. 35 names remaining. Kingsley waited another 3 minutes, then followed Hestia downstairs. The hooded Watcher was gone, either given up or reported what he'd seen to whoever employed him. Either way, the immediate threat had passed. Back at the bar, Kingsley paid for his tea, exchanged a few more words with Tom about the weather, then flewed back to the ministry. The atrium's crowds had thinned as morning meetings absorbed ministry workers into their departments. Kingsley rode the lift to level 2, noting the other passengers. a nervous-looking wizard from magical accidents, 2 witches discussing budget allocations, an elderly warlock who smelled faintly of Bunderman secretions. Normal, ordinary, safe. The Auror office had filled during his absence. Dawlish stood near the incident map, apparently arguing with Savage about patrol routes. Scrimgeour's office door was closed, probably another meeting with Fudge or Umbridge. Robards waved from his desk, then returned to his paperwork. Kingsley settled back into his routine, opening files, making notes, maintaining the fiction that his morning had been spent gathering intelligence in Diagon Alley. He even drafted a brief report documenting conversations with shopkeepers about suspicious individuals. Vague enough to be useless, detailed enough to seem thorough. At 11:30, everything changed. All senior Aurors to the conference room, now! Scrimgeour's voice cut through the office buzz like a severing charm. Kingsley rose with the others, exchanging confused glances with Robards. Emergency meetings were rare, usually reserved for major incidents or ministerial crises. The conference room was packed, all 8 senior Aurors, plus Scrimgeour looking thunderous, plus Dolores Umbridge sitting in the corner like a pink toad on a lily pad. Kingsley's heart rate increased, but his expression remained calm, curious, appropriately concerned. Scrimgeour closed the door, cast privacy charms, and spoke without preamble. Arnold Wilkins from Goblin Liaison has disappeared. Didn't report for work this morning. His flat shows signs of hasty departure. Clothes missing, personal items gone. No indication of forced entry or struggle. Another runner? Dawlish muttered. That's the 14th in 2 weeks. 14 Muggle-born employees fleeing the ministry within a fortnight, Umbridge said sweetly, her voice dripping false concern. One might almost think someone was encouraging them to leave, helping them even. Every Auror in the room tensed. Kingsley kept his breathing steady, his posture relaxed. Madame Undersecretary, Scrimgeour said tightly, we have no evidence of organized assistance. These appear to be individual decisions motivated by fear. Yes, you've said that before. Umbridge's smile never wavered. But fear of what, precisely? The Ministry has implemented no policies threatening Muggle-borns. We've taken no actions justifying such panic. Unless, of course, someone is spreading lies, manufacturing hysteria, perhaps even facilitating escapes to make the Ministry appear dangerous. You're suggesting a conspiracy, Robards said carefully. I'm suggesting we investigate all possibilities. Umbridge pulled out a scroll, unrolled it with deliberate slowness. I've prepared a list of individuals who should be questioned regarding these departures. Ministry employees who've had contact with the missing persons, who've expressed, shall we say, inappropriate sympathy for Dumbledore's delusions. Kingsley's name was on that list. He knew it before Umbridge read it aloud. Auror Kingsley Shacklebolt, you interviewed Arnold Wilkins yesterday, correct? I did. Routine questioning about Eleanor Whitmore's disappearance. Kingsley's voice remained steady, professional. He provided no useful information. How did he seem? Nervous, afraid, planning to flee. He seemed like a man concerned about a missing colleague. Nothing more. And yet, less than 24 hours after your interview, he vanishes. Umbridge tilted her head, studying him like a predator, examining prey. Quite a coincidence. Coincidences happen, ma'am. It's hardly evidence of conspiracy. Perhaps not. But patterns are emerging, Auror Shacklebolt. Patterns I find deeply troubling. Umbridge turned to Scrimgeour. "I recommend increased surveillance of certain Ministry personnel. Anyone who's had recent contact with the missing Muggleborns, anyone who's expressed doubt about Ministry policy, anyone who might be working with Dumbledore's illegal organisation." "The Order of the Phoenix isn't illegal," Kingsley said quietly. "It's not even proven to exist." "Oh, it exists, and it's recruiting, and someone in this ministry is helping them." Umbridge's voice hardened, the sweet facade cracking slightly. "The Minister has authorized me to implement enhanced security measures, background reviews, loyalty assessments, increased monitoring, starting immediately." Scrimgeour's jaw clenched. "That's beyond your authority." "It's exactly within my authority as Senior Undersecretary to the Minister. Unless you'd like to explain to Minister Fudge why you're obstructing security investigations." Umbridge's smile returned, sharp as broken glass. "I thought not." The meeting continued another 20 minutes, Umbridge outlining her enhanced security measures, Scrimgeour barely containing his rage, various Aurors asking questions that received non-answers. Kingsley participated minimally, spoke only when directly addressed, gave nothing away. But internally, he was recalculating everything. Umbridge suspected. She didn't have proof, couldn't have proof, he'd been too careful. But she suspected, which meant increased surveillance, closer scrutiny, less freedom to operate. The extraction timeline just collapsed from 1 week to 2 days. The meeting finally ended. Aurors filed out, speaking in low voices, exchanging worried glances. Kingsley returned to his desk, sat down, and forced himself to breathe normally. 2 days. He could manage 2 more extractions in 2 days, if he pushed, if he took risks, if he got lucky. 3 names immediately came to mind. Susanna Hayes from Magical Transportation, Thomas Pemberton from Personnel Registry, and Dirk Cresswell from Goblin Liaison. All on his priority list, all increasingly vulnerable, all needing extraction before Umbridge's enhanced security trapped them. 3 lives, 2 days, escalating danger. At his desk, Kingsley withdrew a fresh piece of parchment and began drafting a report about his Diagon Alley intelligence gathering. Completely fictitious, thoroughly detailed, perfectly documented. Every word would be read, analysed, questioned. Every sentence had to be perfect. Because Dolores Umbridge was watching now. Really watching. Not just casual surveillance, but active investigation. And one mistake would destroy everything. Around him, the Auror office continued its normal rhythms. Dawlish argued with Savage about something trivial. Proudfoot filed reports. A junior Auror delivered interdepartmental memos. Ordinary ministry life grinding forward as it always had. But Kingsley could feel the walls closing in. Not just around him. Around every Muggleborn still working in this building, around every person whose blood wasn't pure enough for the new regime being built in the Ministry's shadows. 14 people had already fled. 14 lives saved by their own instincts or by quiet intervention. How many more could he reach before the window closed completely? At 3, Kingsley made a decision. He stood, gathered his briefcase, and approached Scrimgeour's office. The head Auror looked up from his desk, exhaustion evident in every line of his scarred face. "Sir, I need to accelerate my investigation into Death Eater movements. The pattern suggests they're coordinating attacks on Muggleborn residences, and I believe I can identify their next targets." "What do you need?" "Freedom to operate off-grid for the next 48 hours. No scheduled check-ins, no tracking, complete autonomy. If I'm right about their pattern, I can prevent multiple attacks, but only if I can move quickly and quietly. Scrimgeour studied him for a long moment. Umbridge will hate this. She wants everyone under surveillance, everyone accounted for. Which is exactly why I need to move now, before her enhanced security makes effective investigation impossible. Another pause. Then Scrimgeour nodded slowly. 48 hours. Off-grid. But Shacklebolt, if this goes wrong, if Umbridge catches you doing something that even looks like helping people flee... I understand, sir. Complete deniability. You knew nothing. Damn right I knew nothing. Now get out of here before I change my mind. Kingsley left the office, his heart pounding, but his expression calm. 48 hours of freedom. 48 hours to save 3 more lives before the window slammed shut forever. He took the lift to level 1, joined the flu queue one more time, and prepared for the most dangerous 2 days of his life. 3 names, 2 days, 1 chance. It would have to be enough. The flu flames deposited Kingsley in a narrow alley behind the leaky cauldron, rain already soaking through his robes despite the overhang. He'd memorized 17 different flu addresses that connected to hidden passages, forgotten networks, routes the Ministry had never properly mapped. This one led to a 4th century sewer tunnel that accessed, through a series of increasingly uncomfortable transitions, the portrait network connecting to order-safe houses. 48 hours of freedom. He intended to use every minute. First stop. Contact the Order, coordinate extractions, ensure safe houses were prepared for multiple arrivals. Then, Susanna Hayes from Magical Transportation, followed by Thomas Pemberton, and finally, Dirk Cresswell. 3 lives in 2 days, pushing every limit, risking everything. The rain intensified as Kingsley navigated the alley, his wand lit just enough to see ancient cobblestones slick with centuries of grime. Behind a dumpster that reeked of rotting vegetables, he found what he was looking for. A rusted iron grate covering a drain. He knelt, ignoring the filth soaking into his robes, and whispered the password. Fortis fortuna adjuvat. Fortune favours the bold. An old Roman saying, chosen by Dumbledore himself for the London safe routes. The grate shimmered, no longer iron but shimmering magical energy, and swung open silently. Kingsley descended into darkness. The tunnel was exactly as unpleasant as he remembered from his previous reconnaissance. Low ceiling, water trickling through channels worn by millennia, the smell of damp stone and things best left unidentified. But it was secure, unmonitored, and led exactly where he needed to go. He moved carefully, wand light reflecting off wet stone, counting paces automatically. 47 steps straight, then left at the junction where Roman numerals were still barely visible on ancient bricks. Another 32 steps, then. A portrait frame, mounted impossibly in a sewer tunnel, depicting a stern-looking witch in medieval robes. Her painted eyes opened as Kingsley approached. "Password," she demanded, her voice echoing oddly in the confined space. "The stars are bright tonight." Response. "But the darkness remains." The portrait swung open, revealing not more tunnel, but warm firelight, and the sound of voices. Kingsley stepped through, grateful for the magic that kept sewer filth from following him into the Order's safe house. He emerged in a cozy kitchen, old farmhouse style, with heavy wooden beams across the ceiling. A massive fireplace crackling with welcoming flames, and Molly Weasley standing at the stove, stirring something that smelled like heaven. "Kingsley." She turned, wooden spoon still in hand, her round face creasing with concern and welcome. "We weren't expecting you until tonight. Is something wrong?" "Timelines accelerated. Umbridge is implementing enhanced security measures, increased surveillance, loyalty checks, background reviews. I have 48 hours before my movements become too restricted to continue extractions." Kingsley accepted the towel Molly handed him, dried his face and hands. "I need 3 safe houses prepared for immediate occupancy. Hayes, Pemberton, and Cresswell. All by Saturday night." 3 in 2 days. Kingsley, that's necessary. These people are running out of time. He met her eyes. "Can it be done?" Molly's jaw set in that expression her children knew meant argument was futile. "It can be done. It will be done. Let me get Dumbledore. He's upstairs with Sirius and Remus planning operations." She disappeared through a doorway, leaving Kingsley alone in the kitchen. He moved to the fire, warming hands that were cold from more than just rain and sewers. This safe house, one of 7 the Order maintained throughout Britain, sat somewhere in Cornwall, hidden under Fidelius' charm and protected by ward schemes that would make Gringotts look underdefended. Arnold Wilkins was here, probably terrified, probably questioning every decision, but alive and safe. That counted for something. Footsteps on stairs announced company. Albus Dumbledore entered first, his blue robe slightly wrinkled, half-moon spectacles perched on his crooked nose, eyes twinkling with that characteristic mix of wisdom and mischief. Behind him came Sirius Black, looking gaunt but alert, and Remus Lupin, his scarred face grave. "Kingsley, my dear boy." Dumbledore's voice was warm, but his eyes were serious. "Molly tells me we have complications. Umbridge is circling. She suspects someone's helping Muggleborns flee, and I'm on her list of persons of interest." Kingsley outlined the morning's events. The meeting, Umbridge's accusations, Scrimgeour's tacit approval for off-grid operations. "I have 2 days of relative freedom. After that, surveillance increases, and extractions become nearly impossible. 3 more people in 48 hours. Remus shook his head. "That's pushing your luck dangerously thin." "Luck's already thin. I'm just using what's left." Kingsley pulled out a piece of parchment, his coded list, names and details committed to memory, but documented for coordination purposes. Susanna Hayes works in magical transportation. Single, no family in Britain, already received anonymous threats. Easiest extraction of the 3. She knows something's wrong. She's expecting trouble. "When?" Sirius leaned against the kitchen counter, arms crossed. "Tonight. I'll make contact this afternoon. Extraction after her shift ends at 6. She can flew from work to a public connection, then through the portrait network here." Kingsley moved to the second name. "Thomas Pemberton, Personnel Registry Clerk. More complicated. He's young, nervous, might panic. But he processed Eleanor Whitmore's file the day before she disappeared, which means Umbridge will question him eventually." "How are you making contact?" Dumbledore asked. "Ministry cafeteria during afternoon tea rush, crowded, noisy, perfect for a quiet conversation that looks like a casual interaction." Kingsley traced the schedule in his mind. If Pemberton agrees, extraction happens tomorrow morning. If he refuses, I move to Cresswell immediately. "And Dirk Cresswell?" Remus's voice was quiet. "The hardest of the 3. Senior position in Goblin Liaison, well known. His disappearance will cause immediate investigation. Kingsley paused. But he's also in the most danger. Umbridge has already flagged his file. I saw it on her list during this morning's meeting. If I don't extract him by Saturday, someone else will get to him first. Silence filled the kitchen, broken only by the fire's crackling and Molly's soup bubbling on the stove. Everyone understood what Kingsley wasn't saying. 3 extractions in 2 days would burn him as an asset. After this, his usefulness to the Order would be severely compromised, possibly destroyed entirely. 1 intelligence operative traded for 3 lives. The mathematics of war. Dumbledore moved to the window, looking out at Cornwall's rain-swept countryside. Have you considered, Kingsley, that this might be exactly what Umbridge wants? Push you into desperate action, catch you in the act, use your arrest to justify even harsher measures against Muggleborns. I've considered it. I'm doing this anyway. Why? Sirius asked, not challenging, but genuinely curious. Because if I don't, 3 people die or worse, and I can live with Umbridge arresting me. I can't live with knowing I had the chance to save them and chose my own safety instead. Kingsley met each of their eyes in turn. We all made choices when we joined the Order. This is mine. Dumbledore turned from the window, his expression unreadable. Then he smiled. Not the grandfatherly twinkle he showed most people, but something harder, sadder, infinitely more real. Then we ensure you succeed. Molly, prepare all 3 safe houses. Remus, coordinate with our contacts in Ireland and France. These people will need new identities, new lives. Sirius, review the portrait network routes. Identify backup passages in case primary routes are compromised. And me? Kingsley asked. You, my dear Kingsley, will do what you do best. Save lives, while the rest of us watch in admiration. Dumbledore's voice softened. But do try to avoid getting arrested. Training new intelligence operatives is frightfully time-consuming. The humour was gentle, but the concern behind it was real. Kingsley nodded, acknowledgement, then turned back to practical matters. I need to see Wilkins before I leave. Make sure he's settling in. Answer any questions. Room 3, upstairs. Hestia's been sitting with him, helping him process. Molly returned to her soup, but her voice was tight with worry. Poor boy's devastated. Keeps talking about his parents, his flat, his job, everything he left behind. Kingsley climbed the narrow stairs, each step creaking underfoot. The safe house was larger than it appeared from the kitchen. 7 bedrooms, multiple bathrooms, a library that Remus had probably already claimed. Protective enchantments hummed in the walls, making his skin tingle slightly. Room 3's door stood slightly ajar. Kingsley knocked softly, then entered. Arnold Wilkins sat on a narrow bed, staring at his hands. Hestia Jones occupied a chair near the window, reading, but obviously keeping watch. She looked up when Kingsley entered, nodded greeting, then quietly excused herself. "Arnold," Kingsley said gently. Wilkins looked up, his round face blotchy from crying. "Auror Shacklebolt. I mean, do I still call you that? Are you even really an Auror? Or was that all just..." "I'm really an Auror. I really work for the Ministry. I just don't work only for the Ministry." Kingsley sat in the chair Hestia had vacated. "How are you holding up?" "I'm safe. Everyone keeps telling me I'm safe. But I don't feel safe. I feel like I'm hiding, like I'm a criminal, like I gave up everything for nothing." Wilkins's voice broke. "What if you're wrong? What if the Registration Commission was really just administrative? What if I panicked over nothing and threw my life away? Kingsley let the questions hang for a moment, then spoke quietly. This morning, the Ministry received reports that 3 Muggle-born wizards were attacked in their homes last night. 2 hospitalized at St. Mungo's, 1 still missing. All 3 had been scheduled for heritage verification this week. Wilkins went pale. But the Ministry said, "The Ministry is lying, or Fudge is being lied to and is too stubborn to see it. Either way, the threat is real." Kingsley leaned forward. "Arnold, I know this is hard. I know you've lost everything familiar. But you're alive. You're free. And in a few days you'll have new papers, a new identity, and a new start somewhere the Registration Commission can't reach you. What about my parents? The Order has already made contact. They know you're safe. They're being watched. Anyone connected to missing Muggleborns is monitored. But they're not in immediate danger." Kingsley paused. "Eventually, when things settle, arrangements might be made for you to see them. Not soon, but someday." Wilkins nodded, slowly, wiping his eyes. "Thank you. I don't think I said that properly yesterday. I was too scared, too confused. But thank you for risking everything to save me. You'd do the same if positions were reversed. That's what makes us different from the people compiling those lists. We see each other as human beings worth saving." Kingsley stood, placed a hand briefly on Wilkins's shoulder. "Try to rest. Eat Molly's soup. It's magical in every sense. And know that your choice, difficult as it was the right one." Back downstairs, Kingsley found the planning session in full swing. Maps spread across the kitchen table, Remus marking safe routes with a charmed quill, Sirius arguing about backup contingencies, Molly organizing supplies with frightening efficiency. "Hayes can use the Cornwall house after Wilkins transfers to Ireland," Molly was saying. "Pemberton goes to the Wales location. It's smaller, but more secure. And Cresswell?" "Cresswell needs France immediately," Dumbledore finished. "He's too visible, too senior. Keeping him in Britain, even hidden, is too risky." They worked for another hour, refining plans, identifying risks, building contingencies. Kingsley absorbed it all, his mind organizing the chaos into actionable steps. 48 hours. 3 extractions, dozens of moving parts that all had to align perfectly. Finally, as afternoon shadows lengthened outside, Kingsley stood. "I need to get back to London, make contact with Hayes before end of business." "Be careful," Remus said quietly. "Always am." "No, you're not." Sirius grinned, but his eyes were serious. "You're brave and brilliant, and occasionally reckless. Just try to be slightly less reckless over the next 2 days." "I'll do my best." Dumbledore walked him to the portrait passage. Before Kingsley stepped through, the old wizard spoke softly. "You know this may be your last operation for the Order. Once Umbridge focuses her attention fully on you, your effectiveness as an intelligence asset becomes severely limited." "I know. And you're proceeding anyway." "I am. Then I will say only this. Your father would be enormously proud of the man you've become, as am I." Dumbledore's eyes held unusual gravity. "Whatever happens over the next 48 hours, remember that courage is not the absence of fear, but action in spite of it. You embody that truth, Kingsley Shacklebolt." Kingsley nodded, not trusting himself to speak, then stepped through the portrait into the damp tunnel beyond. The return journey through sewers and alleys seemed faster somehow, purpose driving each step. By the time he emerged behind the leaky cauldron, rain had stopped, leaving London glistening and grey in late afternoon light. He flew back to the ministry at 4:15, early enough to seem like he'd been working all day, late enough to avoid excessive questions. The atrium was busy with end-of-day traffic, people preparing to leave, completing last-minute tasks. Kingsley went directly to Level 5, to the Department of Magical Transportation, where Susanna Hayes worked. The department was quieter than Auror headquarters, filled with the sounds of quills scratching parchment and low conversations about flu network regulations. He found Hayes at her desk, a thin witch with prematurely grey hair and worried eyes that never quite stopped scanning her surroundings. She looked up when Kingsley approached, and he saw immediate recognition, not of him specifically, but of what he represented, someone who might help, or might arrest her. The uncertainty in her expression was heartbreaking. "Miss Hayes," Kingsley said quietly, "might I have a word, somewhere private?" She glanced around, then nodded. "Conference room 2 is empty. This way." They walked in silence, Hayes's tension evident in every line of her body. Inside the small conference room, Kingsley cast Muffliato and turned to face her. "I'm going to ask you a question, Miss Hayes, and I need you to answer honestly. Do you feel safe working at the ministry?" Her breath hitched. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, "No, I don't feel safe anywhere anymore." "Then let me help you. Tonight. There's a place you can go. People who will protect you. A future that doesn't involve looking over your shoulder every moment." Tears spilled down Hayes's cheeks. "I've been so scared. The threats, the whispers, the way people look at me now, like I'm contaminated, dangerous, less than human because my parents don't have magic." "You're not less than anything. You're a talented witch, a valuable person, and you deserve to live without fear." Kingsley's deep voice was gentle but firm. 6 o'clock, when your shift ends, go to the public flu network on Level 1. Throw powder, say 14 Blackwood Lane. Someone will meet you on the other side. They'll say, "Dumbledore sends his regards." Trust them. Just like that, I just leave everything I've built here, or stay and hope the people sending you threats don't follow through. Your choice, Miss Hayes, but choose quickly. Opportunities like this don't last. She stared at him, searching his face for deception, for ulterior motives, for anything that would help her make sense of this impossible decision. Finally, she whispered, 6 o'clock, 14 Blackwood Lane. Dumbledore sends his regards. Good. Act normally until then. Finish your work. Show no indication anything's changed. Kingsley moved toward the door, then paused. You're making the right choice. I promise you that. He left her there, standing alone in the conference room, and returned to Level 2. 1 down, 2 to go. The Auror office was emptying as 6 o'clock approached. Kingsley made a show of finishing reports, filing paperwork, maintaining the fiction of normal workday activities. At 6:05, he packed his briefcase and headed for the atrium. The flu network was busy with departing ministry workers. Kingsley positioned himself where he could observe, without being obvious, watching the fireplaces, waiting. At 6:12, Susanna Hayes appeared. She looked terrified, but determined. She threw powder, spoke the address clearly, and vanished into green flames. 1 life saved, 2 to go. 47 hours remaining. Kingsley flew home, dropping his mask the moment his flats wards closed around him. Tomorrow would bring Thomas Pemberton, then Dirk Cresswell. Tomorrow would bring increased risk, heightened scrutiny, the very real possibility that everything would collapse. But tonight, Susanna Hayes was safe, and that would have to be enough. Friday morning arrived cold and crystalline, frost-etching patterns on windows across London like nature's own protective runes. Kingsley stood in his flat, watching dawn break over the city, knowing this would be his last day of operational freedom. Tomorrow, Umbridge's enhanced security measures would activate fully. Tomorrow, every movement would be tracked, every conversation monitored, every action scrutinized. Today, he had to save 2 more lives. Thomas Pemberton first, the nervous young clerk from Personnel Registry who'd processed Eleanor Whitmore's file. Then Dirk Cresswell, the senior official whose disappearance would trigger immediate, intensive investigation. 2 extractions in one day, each progressively more dangerous than the last. The mathematics of sacrifice. Kingsley dressed with particular care, choosing robes that projected absolute authority. Deep indigo with silver threading, his gold earring polished until it gleamed, every detail reinforcing the image of an Auror completely confident in his righteousness. The mask had to be perfect today. One slip, one moment of doubt visible on his face, and everything collapsed. He flew to the ministry at 7:30, deliberately early. The atrium was still relatively quiet, just early arrivals and night shift security preparing to rotate out. The golden fountain sparkled in the enchanted morning light, that obscene statue still depicting servitude as the natural order of things. Soon, Kingsley promised himself. When this war ends, when, not if, that abomination comes down. Early again, Shacklebolt. Old Dawkins looked tired, his night shift evident in the dark circles under his eyes. You trying to make the rest of us look bad? Just trying to stay ahead of the paperwork. Kingsley smiled, his deep voice carrying warmth he didn't feel. How's your grandson adjusting to Hogwarts? Loves it. Writes every week about Quidditch and his classes. Says Professor Sprout is teaching them about venomous tentacula, nasty things, but the boys fascinated. Dawkins chuckled. Reminds me of my own school days. Hufflepuff produces the best herbologists. He's in good hands. Kingsley moved toward the lifts, then paused, as if a thought had just occurred. Dawkins, if you ever hear rumours about students being targeted because of their parentage, you'd report that, right? The security guard's expression shifted, something uncertain flickering across his weathered face. Course I would. Though between you and me, I don't like some of the talk I'm hearing lately. All this business about blood purity, Muggle-born registration. My grandson's mother is Muggle-born, and she's worth 10 purebloods I could name. Remember that, if things get darker. Remember that blood doesn't determine worth. Kingsley held his gaze for a moment, then nodded and entered the lift. The seed was planted. Not enough to recruit Dawkins to active resistance, but enough to make him question, to hesitate if ordered to do something unconscionable. Small acts of conscience added up. The Auror office was empty except for Proudfoot, who looked like he'd slept at his desk. Morning, Kingsley. Thought you were supposed to be off-grid? Came back early. Couldn't sleep. Figured I might as well work. Kingsley set down his briefcase. Any developments overnight? Depends on your definition of development. 3 more Muggleborns quit yesterday. 2 from Magical Law Enforcement, 1 from the Department of Mysteries. Umbridge is having fits, demanding investigations, making all sorts of accusations about conspiracies. Proudfoot rubbed his eyes. Scrimgeour's barely holding her off. 3 more. Kingsley let carefully calibrated concern show on his face. That's 17 in 2.5 weeks. This isn't random panic anymore. No, it's not. It's organized. Proudfoot lowered his voice, glancing around the empty office. Someone's helping there. Has to be. This many people don't just vanish without assistance, without coordination, without resources. The Order? Who else? Dumbledore's been planning for renewed conflict since you-know-who returned. Makes sense he'd evacuate vulnerable people before the real fighting starts. Proudfoot paused. Question is, how are they doing it? How do you move 17 people out of ministry employment without leaving traces? Kingsley shrugged, the picture of thoughtful speculation. Multiple routes, probably. Portrait passages, unregistered flu connections, apparition to locations under Fidelius charms. Classic resistance tactics from the First War. You studied that, didn't you? The First War's underground networks. Required reading at Auror Academy. Know your enemy's tactics, but also know the tactics that defeated them. Kingsley moved to his desk, opened files. I should get to work. This Cardiff case isn't solving itself. Proudfoot nodded and returned to his own paperwork, apparently satisfied with the conversation. Perfect. Kingsley had just provided plausible theories that would be reported to Scrimgeour, who might mention them to Umbridge, sending ministry investigations down paths that led nowhere. Misdirection was an art form. At Nines, the Auror office began filling with morning arrivals. Dawlish appeared, looking sour. Savage and Williamson arrived together, discussing Quidditch scores. Scrimgeour emerged from his office, barked a few orders, then retreated into another meeting. Normal Friday morning, routine ministry operations. Nothing to suggest that before the day ended, 2 more people would vanish, and Kingsley Shacklebolt's career would be permanently compromised. At 10:30, Kingsley stood, stretched, and announced to no one in particular. Need to check something in personnel registry. Back in an hour. No one questioned it. Aurors consulted with other departments constantly. Robards barely looked up from his paperwork. Kingsley took the lift to level 4, where personnel registry occupied a warren of cramped offices, filled with filing cabinets, enchanted record books, and harried-looking clerks drowning in administrative tedium. Thomas Pemberton sat at a desk near the back, looking even more nervous than usual, his pale face drawn and his hands trembling as they sorted through employee files. He looked up when Kingsley approached, and immediate terror flooded his expression. Auror Shacklebolt, how can I help you? Need to review some personnel records. Background checks for the ongoing investigation. Kingsley kept his voice casual, professional. Is there somewhere private we could speak? Want to make sure I understand the filing system correctly. Pemberton swallowed hard, nodded jerkily. Back room. This way. The back room was barely more than a closet. Shelves of old files. Dust thick in the air. A single flickering light providing inadequate illumination. Perfect privacy. Kingsley closed the door, cast Muffliato, and turned to face the terrified clerk. Thomas, I know you're afraid. I haven't. Whatever you think I've done. The words tumbled out in a panicked rush. You processed Eleanor Whitmore's file the day before she disappeared. You saw who accessed it, who flagged it for the Registration Commission. Kingsley's voice was gentle, but firm. That makes you a witness, and witnesses to this particular bureaucratic nightmare have a habit of disappearing. Pemberton's legs seemed to give out. He slumped against the filing cabinets, his face ashen. I knew. As soon as she vanished, I knew I was next. I've been waiting every day for them to come for me. They will come, probably Monday, when Umbridge's enhanced security measures activate fully. Kingsley moved closer, keeping his posture non-threatening. But you don't have to wait for that. You can leave. Now, today, I can help you. Leave? Leave my job, my life, everything? Pemberton's voice cracked. I'm nobody, Auror. I'm just a clerk who files paperwork. Why would anyone target me? Because you know something someone wants hidden. Because silence is maintained by eliminating witnesses. Because in wars, even wars not yet officially declared, bureaucrats who process the wrong paperwork become casualties. Kingsley paused, letting that sink in. I'm offering you a choice, Thomas. Trust me. Leave now. Start a new life somewhere safe. Or trust the ministry. Stay here and hope. Umbridge's questions remain gentle. Pemberton stared at him, tears streaming down his young face. I'm 23 years old. My mum just got over dragonpox. My little sister's supposed to start Hogwarts next year. How do I just abandon them? You don't abandon them. You protect them by removing yourself as a target. The Order will ensure your family knows you're safe, will monitor them for threats, will evacuate them too if necessary. Kingsley's deep voice carried absolute conviction. But Thomas, I need an answer. Now. Today. Because my window for helping people is closing, and if you're not through it before it slams shut, there's nothing I can do. Silence stretched between them, broken only by Pemberton's shaky breathing and the distant sounds of the registry office beyond the door. Finally, the young clerk nodded. Tell me what to do. Relief flooded through Kingsley. At lunch, leave the building. Don't tell anyone, don't make excuses, just go. Head to the Leaky Cauldron, order food, but don't eat it. At exactly 1 o'clock, go upstairs to room 7. Someone will meet you there. They'll say, Dumbledore sends his regards. Trust them absolutely. 1 o'clock, room 7. Dumbledore sends his regards. Pemberton wiped his eyes. Will I ever see my family again? Someday. When it's safe. When this war ends and people like us win instead of people like Umbridge. Kingsley placed a hand briefly on the young man's shoulder. You're braver than you think, Thomas. Choosing to live when everything tells you to give up. That's the hardest kind of courage. He removed the muffliato, opened the door, and stepped back into the registry office. Thank you for the clarification on the filing protocols, Mr. Pemberton. Very helpful. Of course, Auror Shacklebolt. Any time. The performance was adequate. Not brilliant, but adequate. And adequate would have to be enough. Back in the Auror office, Kingsley spent the late morning documenting his fictional investigation into Death Eater movements. Every word was carefully chosen, every detail precisely vague enough to be useless while appearing thorough. The report would satisfy Scrimgeour, might even satisfy Umbridge momentarily, and provided perfect cover for a day spent saving lives instead of investigating crimes. At 12:45, Kingsley left his desk again. Grabbing lunch, back by 2. He flewed to Diagon Alley, walked to the Leaky Cauldron, and positioned himself at the bar where he could observe, without being obvious. Tom served him shepherd's pie he didn't taste, and tea he barely drank, his attention focused on the door. Thomas Pemberton arrived at 12:53, looking like he might vomit from terror. He ordered soup, sat at a table, and stared at his bowl without eating. At 1, Hestia Jones entered, moved smoothly to Pemberton's table, spoke quietly. The young clerk stood on shaky legs and followed her upstairs. 2 down, 1 to go, but the last extraction would be the hardest. Kingsley flewed back to the ministry, returned to the Auror office, and spent the afternoon in carefully orchestrated routine. Reports filed, meetings attended, conversations held with colleagues about everything, except the fact that his heart was pounding and his mind was racing through contingencies for the evening's operation. Dirk Cresswell, senior official, well-known, highly visible. His disappearance would trigger immediate investigation, maximum scrutiny, department-wide panic. Also, the person most likely to be arrested by Monday if Kingsley didn't act tonight. At 5:30, most of the Auror office had emptied. Kingsley packed his briefcase with deliberate slowness, exchanged goodnights with the few remaining colleagues, and took the lift to level 5, where Goblin Liaison was located. Cresswell was still at his desk. He usually worked late, a fact Kingsley had verified during surveillance. The portly wizard looked exhausted, surrounded by treaties and exchange rate calculations, his cheerful demeanor worn thin by whatever pressures he was facing. "Cresswell," Kingsley said quietly. The senior official looked up, started to smile, then froze as he registered something in Kingsley's expression. "Shacklebolt, what's wrong? We need to talk, somewhere very private, very secure." I don't understand." "Yes, you do." Kingsley's voice was gentle but unyielding. "You're Muggle-born, you're successful, you're visible, and you're on Umbridge's list for immediate detention starting Monday. So we need to talk. Now." Cresswell's face went pale. Without a word, he stood, led Kingsley to a small private office, closed the door, and cast every privacy charm he knew. "Detention? For what? I haven't—" "For existing while having non-magical parents. That's the crime now, Dirk. That's what the Registration Commission is really about. Not verification, but elimination." Kingsley moved closer. "I'm offering you one chance to avoid that fate. Tonight. Leave with me right now to a place where Umbridge can't reach you." "Leave? Kingsley, I've been with the Ministry for 15 years. I have seniority, responsibilities, ongoing negotiations with 3 goblin clans, which will all continue without you. Or, more accurately, which won't matter at all when you're imprisoned or dead." Kingsley let the harsh reality hang between them. "I know what I'm asking. I know the cost. But Dirk, I've watched 17 Muggleborns flee the Ministry in the past 2 weeks because they saw what was coming. You need to see it too." Cresswell sank into a chair, his round face crumpling. "Merlin, this is really happening. It's really happening again, isn't it? The first war, the persecution, the fear, it's all coming back. It never really left. It just hid, waiting for the right moment to resurface." Kingsley knelt, bringing himself to eye level with the devastated official. "But you don't have to be a victim. You can choose to survive. Let me help you. My wife will be contacted, protected, evacuated if necessary. The Order takes care of families." "The Order?" Cresswell looked up sharply. "Dumbledore's organization? They're real?" "They're real. They're organized, and they're saving lives while the Ministry pretends nothing's wrong." Kingsley stood, extended his hand. "Come with me, right now. Walk out of this building as if you're heading home for the weekend. Trust me to get you somewhere safe." Cresswell stared at Kingsley's outstretched hand for what felt like an eternity. Then, slowly, he reached out and grasped it. "What do I need to do?" "Leave your work exactly as it is, mid-sentence if necessary. We need it to look like you intended to return Monday. Take only your wand and the clothes you're wearing. Everything else stays." They left the private office, Cresswell calling goodnight to a few remaining Goblin liaison staff, maintaining the perfect fiction of a normal Friday evening departure. Down the lifts to the atrium, across the marble floor, past the golden fountain, toward the flue network fireplaces. Kingsley's every sense was hyper-alert, watching for ministry security, for anyone paying too much attention, for Umbridge's people monitoring movements. But the atrium was busy with end-of-week departures, people rushing home to families and weekend plans. They reached a fireplace. Kingsley spoke quietly. "Throw powder. Say 14 Blackwood Lane. Someone will meet you. They'll say, 'Dumbledore sends his regards.' I've heard the rumours." Cresswell managed a weak smile. "Thank you, Kingsley, for everything, for risking your career, probably your freedom, to save people like me. People like you make the magical world worth saving. Now go." Cresswell threw flue powder, spoke the address clearly, and vanished into green flames. 3 lives saved. 48 hours of operational freedom concluded. Kingsley Shacklebolt's usefulness as an undercover intelligence asset effectively destroyed. He stood alone in the atrium, the golden fountain's water sparkling behind him, and felt the weight of what he'd accomplished and what it had cost settle on his shoulders like a physical burden. On Monday, Umbridge would discover 3 more disappearances. She'd investigate, compile evidence, build her case. Eventually, maybe not immediately, but eventually, the pattern would point toward him, and when it did, his career would end. Possibly his freedom, possibly his life. But tonight, Eleanor Whitmore, Arnold Wilkins, Susanna Hayes, Thomas Pemberton, and Dirk Cresswell were safe. 5 people who would have been detained, questioned, possibly killed, were instead starting new lives in places where blood purity didn't determine worth. 5 lives against 1 career. The mathematics worked. Kingsley flued home, his flats wards closing around him like an embrace. He poured himself fire whiskey, a luxury he rarely indulged, and moved to his window overlooking Muggle London. Lights were coming on across the city. Ordinary. People living ordinary lives, unaware of the war brewing in the shadows. His own flat was sparse, functional, the home of a man who'd never expected to need much, who dedicated his life to service rather than comfort. Photographs lined one shelf. His parents, both dead now, his Auror Academy graduation, a group shot of the original Order of the Phoenix from the First War, young faces full of hope and determination. So many of those faces were gone now. Dead in the First War, casualties of Voldemort's initial reign of terror. But some remained. Dumbledore, Moody, Remus. The survivors, carrying forward the fight, recruiting a new generation to stand against darkness. Kingsley raised his glass to the photograph, a silent toast to those who'd come before and those who'd come after. Tomorrow, he'd report to Scrimgeour, document his week's work, prepare for the Muggle Prime Minister assignment that would limit his operational freedom even further. But tonight, he'd allow himself to be Kingsley Shacklebolt, not Auror, not intelligence operative, not Order member. Just a man who'd done what he believed was right, regardless of cost. His wand lay on the table beside him, polished wood that had served him faithfully for years. Tomorrow, he'd pick it up and continue serving, continue fighting, continue working toward a world where blood status didn't determine destiny. The war was coming. Everyone knew it, whether they admitted it publicly or not. Voldemort was gathering power, recruiting followers, preparing for his second attempt to dominate the magical world. The ministry was fragmenting, corrupting from within, choosing denial over preparation. And people like Kingsley, people who chose conscience over convenience, would be caught in the middle, branded as traitors by those who should have been allies, hunted by those who should have been protecting citizens instead of persecuting them. But that was the burden leadership demanded. That was the price integrity required. Kingsley finished his fire whiskey, set the glass down with deliberate care, and turned from the window. Sleep would be difficult tonight. It always was after operations. But he'd try anyway, knowing that tomorrow brought new challenges, new battles, new choices between safety and service. His father had taught him that true courage wasn't the absence of fear, but action despite it. His mother had taught him that justice sometimes required breaking unjust laws. The Order had taught him that small victories mattered, that individual lives saved added up to something larger than themselves. 5 lives saved, 32 names still on his list. A war approaching faster than anyone wanted to admit. But tonight, 5 people slept safely who otherwise wouldn't have. And Kingsley Shacklebolt, former undercover intelligence operative, current Auror, with a dangerously compromised position, allowed himself to believe that was enough. It had to be enough. Because sometimes, in wars against darkness, enough was all anyone could offer, and offering it anyway was what made heroes of ordinary people who simply refused to stop trying. Outside his window, London continued its eternal rhythm. Inside his flat, Kingsley Shacklebolt prepared for whatever came next, his gold earring catching the light, his deep voice silent, but his resolve unshaken. The silent mission had succeeded. Tomorrow, new missions would begin, and the quiet man who saved lives in shadows would continue his work, regardless of cost, until the darkness finally lifted or consumed him entirely. Either way, he'd face it standing. Either way, he'd never stop fighting. That was enough. It had to be.